All right, we're here, Bunch of Burn podcast with Fred and Dan,
Oh,
and me, just the old guys you're used to
the
hearing.
schlubs.
Yeah, the slubs, and we have a guest here, esteemed guest Weasel from Hatewave and Encenathrakh and a million other bands.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Ooh wee.
Hail Satan.
Oh yeah. So I just
What do you want to know? What do you want the rundown on?
I just recently found Haywave because I was kind of going on like a Black Death and grindcore kind of mining session, and I came up on some gold with that album,
Cool.
and then I messaged you, got you, mentioning that you liked the demo a bit better, and I ended up listening to that, and I was like, all right, guys, let's make a pivot and let's listen to that one instead because it is actually a little bit more fierce on there, especially like production wise. Like you're mentioning how Mark would have a like octave down, like down tuned guitar to make that like bass rumble, and it's kind of absent on that album.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I would say at the time, me and Sasha, the singer, guitar player, somewhat songwriter, we all wrote for the band, but he was kind of the main guy. Um, we were into this sort of war metal thing that wasn't really popular in the 90s. We were into Conqueror and Blasphemy and Sadistic Execution and Bestial Warlust and all these kind of rogue bands. Um, and what we thought that was the best of sort of black metal and death metal combined into, sort of like an emo free zone. We didn't really like the melodic aspects of death metal. We wanted it to be really dissonant and angular and stuff like that, but we also wanted constant blasting. So Hatewave, our version of Hatewave, which was kind of the second version of Hatewave, is pretty much a hybrid of that kind of stuff. So um, I think the studio album is a little more generic death metal-y. I don't dislike it, but it's not as heavy and warped as the band actually was. And I think that the 1997 demo actually sounds like what I think our band sounded like. But yeah, we were two guitars and drums, and one of the guitar players sang la la la. Um, but we didn't have a bass player. So yeah, Mark Ruker or Angst, our lead guitar player, used to run his guitar through pitch shifter 2 octaves down, and that's where the low rumble on the demo comes from. So
Mm.
that's what we sounded like live. We'd always had that kind of rumbling, huge kind of like boom car bombast going on underneath our band vault.
Yeah. When I
But it
checked
wasn't
out,
allowed on the studio album. We were told it didn't sound good by the producer, so he didn't allow it to be on the album.
should have got a black metal producer. He would have did anything.
Well, I mean, in Chicago, there were no black metal producers at that point. There definitely were a lot of death metal guys. I mean, I started listening to death metal in the early 90s. A friend turned me onto it, and I thought all heavy metal was like, what? Like Poison or whatever. And then he's like, you never heard Deicide? I was like, what's Deicide? And he played me Legion, and I was like, I'm staying for this. This is H.R. Giger's brain as heavy metal. I'm taking this. So my first death metal show was actually in May '93, and it was Deicide, Vader, and Dismember, I think.
Damn,
So
all in their peak.
that shows you how old I am.
But going from poison to deicide must have been a hell of a cold shower. That'll wake you up.
I don't know, like that. I was kind of more on the punk side of the tracks, and
Hmm.
I didn't. I mean, I knew about Slayer and stuff like that, but I didn't really take it very seriously. But once I heard '90s death metal, like or late '80s death metal, the classic stuff like Morbid Angel, Deicide, Cannibal Corpse, all that kind of stuff. And I
Right.
started seeing those bands live. It just blew me away. So from then on, I was sold. But yeah, I mean, the guy that we did the album with was Brian Griffin, who was in a band called Broken Hope. He's in some other bands too, but he was somewhat older than us, and he had you know, he produced a lot of stuff, but I don't think he was a good fit for us because he kind of steered us towards a generic death metal production, but we weren't a generic death metal band, so it didn't really make any sense, but whatever. I mean, we tried to go in there and record it with our setups and do it our way, and he was like, it sounds like shit. No way, guys. Forget it. You'll do it my way. So we wound up doing the album with both guitar players playing like on the same rig, you know, the same guitar through the same amp and all that stuff, so it would sound like, you know, a Deicide record or whatever. It's not as assaultive as a Deicide record. But we also, I don't know. I think there was, whatever, man. I lost the vote on that. I didn't really go along with the sort of generic death metal production of the album. I like it just fine, and you know, I'm really proud of it. Like those are all live takes on the drums. Like I just go in and hack them out. So I mean, it's cool, but I don't know. We're getting ready to remaster all that stuff, so maybe it'll have a different perspective. There's a label called Mortville Noise that's going to reissue the like complete Hatewave stuff. So I don't know. We're going to give it a shit and a shave and see how it sounds. So
Nice.
whatever.
I was gonna mention. I watched some of your guys' live videos. You got Mark in like the police helmet, and got Sasha like diving into the guitar amps and shit. And you guys do sound like exactly like the demo. Like shit's insane. Like I wanted to get into like audience wise and like reactions to you guys like playing live and releasing your you know, album and demo. Like how did
Yeah.
people perceive that?
I don't think we ever really clicked with people. They didn't really know what to make of us because we weren't a generic death metal band, but at the same time, I suppose we were as individuals we were more associated with kind of like a more arty kind of scene of music, like this kind of no wave or you know noise rock scene. So it was kind of weird. We were sort of halfway between two poles because particularly, I mean, Mark Rucker is like an old school heavy metal guy that can play Eddie Van Halen solos or whatever. He's into like Yngwie Malmsteen and stuff. So he's an actual metalhead, you know what I'm saying? But like me and Sasha were a little more of these mutant weirdos. So our presentation was too bizarre, I think. I mean, we played on bills with 6 Feet Under and Incantation and Napalm Death and stuff like that. And
Like Nile too, right?
mostly, uh, no, we never played with them. I mean, we played a festival called the Expo of the Extreme, and I think Nile was on that,
Oh,
and
okay.
Usurper and a bunch of stuff like that. The funny part about the Expo of the Extreme show, which was in where in the hell was that? It was like '97 or something like that, late '97. We wound up. I didn't know this was going to happen, but the singer wound up beheading a chicken at the end of our set. And he didn't really tell us about that. And there were just videotapes of people threatening to kill us and all this like shit like that. And honestly, first off, I was like, well, this is the Expo of the Extremes. So I
Too
don't know
extreme.
if we're
Kill
being
you.
extreme.
Mission
Like,
accomplished.
yeah, I guess. I mean, I apparently Sasha was a cook and he worked at a restaurant, so he actually took the chicken and made soup out of it later. So it wasn't like a chicken just got murdered and like
It wasn't
you know
mindless
jerked
murder.
Yeah.
off on or you know.
Yeah.
I mean, he wound up. You know, I'm not even trying to backpedal, but he actually literally cut the chicken up and made soup with it later. So
Some
I
good
do
old chicken
remember that it
soup.
was really hard for we had a girlfriend of ours do the chopping of the chicken's head, and she was having a really hard time doing it. It was a thing where it's like, oh no, the poor chicken, like 1, 2, 3, no, like it won't die. So I mean, it was kind of fucked up. And it wasn't really discussed with the band at the time, or if it was, I forgot about it. But apparently, we were really too extreme for the Expo of the Extreme. So whatever. But
Kitchen antics are
I
too
don't know. I
extreme.
mean, we wanted to be fucked up. Uh, I feel like we did a show once where we had projected behind us that one of those guinea pig videos, one of those Japanese kind of gore videos
Oh
from
yeah, yeah.
'90s, like the one with the I don't remember which one, but I wasn't even really particularly into those. But apparently, we played a show where that was projected behind us, and then once again, people got really upset and wanted to kill us and all that stuff. I don't know. You know, like I was so much younger then. I didn't care. I just wanted to be fucking gnarly and disgusting. I mean, that's what you do when you're young. You're just like, hey, what about this? Like, you don't really think about it too much. I'm not really like, I don't care about it. It's lost in the annals of time. Nobody really gives a shit. But at the time, people were kind of upset by it. But I don't think we had like tons and tons of fans. So I think it's interesting that now people still bring the band up and they're fond of it. Great. But, you know, the war metal stuff that we were influenced by in the 90s, people didn't really like that stuff then. I mean, Conqueror weren't a band anyone really cared about back then, or Blasphemy. That's like a huge cult now, but nobody cared about Blasphemy in the 90s. Their records from the dollar bin. I mean, that's where I got them.
Yeah,
But I liked that stuff.
Seems like a big like popularization of that within like the last 10 years or so.
Yeah. I mean, it's fine. I think that metal is a very conservative milieu. I think that a lot of metal, you don't see super radical changes in metal. You see mutations and variations of metal forms. And, you know, like another thing that I've gotten into in the last few years is slam, because it's just this bizarre mutation of death metal that, like, I can't relate to it. Like, I love Peeling Flesh. I saw them play a few years ago at a festival before they were like a big thing. And I was just blown away by it. And it's so funny because I can't relate to them at all, like in terms of their cultural thing, like sort of the rap influences and stuff like that. But when they played, it was so deranged and insane. I was like, oh, I got to check out more slam. I got to get into this. So I don't know. Metal keeps mutating, but it kind of mutates in spite of itself. I don't think it's, most people in metal are not very avant-garde, and that's fine. I mean, I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah, it's almost like a like honoring tradition of like worship or like bands becoming worship bands of you know what they're influenced by rather than like trying to I guess come up with something on their own.
Or it's just a really conformist thing. And in the case of death metal, I don't mind the lack of conformity because you know how it is. If there's one metal band you like, there's probably about 100 more that sound exactly like it. So
Yeah, in
it's all
everyone's
good.
hometown. Yeah.
I have no problem with that. I mean, whatever, it's fine. Like I have so many fucking dollar metal CDs that I bought just because you know how it is. You like go through and you look and like if it's got certain stuff on the cover and certain song titles and da 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 da, you're like, it's a pretty safe bet it's going to be something you care about. And like I'm constantly buying like cheap dollar death metal CDs, and more often than not, I throw them on and I'm like, yep, this is exactly what I wanted. This is what I like. So
That's a great thing about
it's a good
metal,
problem to
right?
have.
Like,
Too many
you,
metal.
you know
bands.
what you get just by looking at the cover 99% of the time.
Yeah,
Blind
most of the
buys are
time.
not that risky in metal, especially extreme metal.
Right, right. And I always liked the kind of folk art aspect of death metal, where um, it's they think they're being more musical than they really are. The whole idea of spending so much time practicing these gnarly riffs and then it just sounds like shush, 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 shush. That was kind of the joke with Encenathrakh was why should we rehearse this stuff? Let's just make it up as we go along. But in the case of Hatewave, I think the influences definitely came out of grindcore and you know like harsh black metal and death metal, and we were kind of into the war metal thing at the time. So Hatewave was just kind of a hybrid of all that stuff.
Yeah, it
Um,
seemed like to me when I first heard it, it was like a concoction of like you mentioned sadistic execution and also sacramentary abolishment on my end. So it was like a
yep,
collision there, order from chaos, and
yep.
definitely discordance axis, especially like drumming wise. It's like just insane, and you go even further with Encenathrakh with you know how extreme you're going. It's
Yeah.
really impressive.
Well, thanks. Other records we liked at the time, we really liked, me and Sasha liked that record Black Thrash Attack by Aura Noir. We thought that was pretty awesome. I don't know that we sounded like that per se, but I liked the kind of baroque viciousness of the riffs and stuff like that. There was kind of a war metal band from Connecticut called Mess Noir that are really obscure. They only
Yes,
have
Mandel is
one album
awesome.
out. Yeah, one album and one demo. They're super awesome, but their songs like don't really repeat at regular intervals. Like everything's like 5 times, 7 times. It's really obstinately asymmetrical. But we thought
Yep.
those guys were pretty awesome. Um,
I'm
we
so
just
glad someone
liked
mentioned that album. I love that album, and no one cares about it.
nobody ever mentions those guys.
Nope.
Those
But they were
guys are like,
awesome.
right? I mean, that was how we found out about stuff like that was a lot of times through magazines like Pit and Sounds of Death. Um, Sounds of Death would give things 10 fucking skulls, and it'd always be like, all right, I gotta go check this out. The first Bestial Warlust record was one of those records where it was like 10 stars. We're like, yeah, cool. So I don't know. The zines were pretty important at the time, that's for sure.
Is that how you guys like kind of circulated your album and your demo?
Yeah, I feel like when we put the demo out, our singer sent a lot out. And back then, there was this whole thing of trading demos. I have letters from some people, like I've got, like a Seth Putnam letter and, stuff like that. You would basically just kind of send your tapes out and just lose the money on the postage. But that was the way to communicate because email was like a thing, but it wasn't really a full blown thing at that point, like the sort of late 80s or late 90s. And I don't know. I mean, you'd read about demos and zines and just order the demo tapes and get them in the mail. I mean, I had all kinds of stuff like that. I mean, I sold a lot of those to eat, so I could eat a sandwich later on. Whatever.
You can't eat
That's
a
how it goes.
CD.
But yeah, I mean, CD is kind of the metal format in a weird way.
Yeah.
Um, but tapes, I'm not romantic about tapes. I was kind of glad when they went away, but um, that was a thing, demo tapes. To know, I
And
had a
you
few.
and you're mentioning like the recording process for the demo. You guys kind of just like went in there and just did it live, and it sounded like how you guys when played shows and stuff, right?
Yeah, we, my roommate was doing live sound for like small gigs at this place called Fireside Bowl, which is kind of a semi-legendary bowling alley that used to have shows in Chicago for a long time. And he helped engineer it. We found some cheap studio that a friend of ours had used, and we kind of hijacked it, set up, and I think we did the whole thing live. The vocals might have been overdubbed at the end, but I mean, basically, it was live in the studio, and we weren't doing any kind of fixing of anything at that point. It was just, it might have even been to ADAT, which is a obsolete 8-track digital audio tape thing that went on a sort of VHS tape, but
Hmm.
it was digital. Um, I don't think there's very many of these machines around anymore, but that was kind of the format that we recorded on. So it was the digital thing. We went in and we did live takes. I think the singer overdubbed the vocals at the end, but he just did one take, like screaming into the microphone or whatever. Um, and I was pretty in charge of the mixing in terms of how I thought it should sound. So yeah, it was done really quickly. It might have been done in 2 afternoons. Like we recorded one afternoon and we did the vocals and mixed in another or something like that. So, it was classic demo. I mean, we knew the songs, we went in, we hacked them out, and that was it. So we did a version of Buried by Time and Dust by Mayhem that at the time the singer didn't want to put on the tape because he didn't want any covers, but I always keep tacking that on to the demo, and I like it because it's a little bit faster than the Mayhem version, so it worked out good. It was hard to play because it starts fast, then it gets faster, and then it gets really fast, and then it goes really fast till the end. So that was definitely an endurance test in terms of blast beats.
Yeah, I heard that on
But
the Bandcamp. You tagged it on the end, and I was I was like, oh, am I missing a track on the YouTube download? But apparently I was.
Yep. Well, that's because it was never the Buried by Time and Dust was never included on the cassette. The cassette was just the 8 songs that you have or whatever. Buried by Time and Dust, I kind of like insisted on doing it, but like I said, it didn't really make the cut for the tape. But whenever I dredge it up, I always throw it back on because I thought it was good. I mean, it's just nonstop blasting, and it just gets faster and faster. It's a great song. I like it.
Yeah. And this band had a previous incarnation with the Sexual Healing, right? Sexual Healing
Okay.
2. Like, that was before you were in the band, right?
Yeah. So as far as I know, I feel like the original Hatewave was formed maybe in like 95 or 96. And they were more of kind of like a noisecore, like a sloppy, kind of noisy band that I don't remember them playing many shows. I mean, I knew those guys, but I don't really remember them playing in many shows. They might have played one or maybe no shows, but I could be proven wrong about that. I don't remember being at them, and I would have. But they were kind of like a rehearsal band that made little demo tapes or whatever, and nobody had access to those tapes. It was just kind of, it was basically, I mean, Sasha, the main guy who sang in both versions of the band, was somebody in our scene that back in the 90s, there was kind of a neighborhood that a lot of people lived in called Wicker Park in Chicago. And he was a cook at this venue called the Empty Bottle. And basically, somehow he got interested in death metal and sort of fell in with us because we were lunatics. The other main guy was this guy, Nandor Navai, who's kind of his own saga. I'll leave the research up to you. He's kind of a legend in his own mind for sure. He's a legend in other people's mind, but he's definitely a legend in his own mind. But he was like one of the first people I met that was really, really into death metal, but was also into really weird music that was uncategorizable. And Nandor's, I mean, he's a legend in his own right. But he wanted to start this band, and he got this other guy, Rick, to play a sampler. So they would do these little weird noisecore kind of things. And Nandor at one point moved to New York, which is why the version of Hatewave started that I was in, because maybe after a year of doing that Hatewave that didn't really do much, he moved to New York. And then Sasha was like, Weasel, you want to be in the band? I was like, yeah. And so he got me and Mark. Nandor is very competitive. He thinks he invented every idea that's ever been made, and everyone's just copying him and not giving him credit.
Well, that's what I thought.
Later on, he decided that he needed to put out a CD of the demo that no one had heard, which is this thing called Sexual Healing 2. And as far as I know, that might have been recorded in like 1995 or 96. It's more noisy and weird than what Hatewave became when I was in it. But that's just Nandor going, see, I'm the real Hatewave, or something like that. I mean, this guy that's just his thing. It's kind of cute. But I don't think anyone really noticed the original Hatewave stuff. I don't know.
Well, I checked it out. Like after I heard the LP, I was like, "How did you guys jump from this to that?"
Because there's completely different musicians.
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest, the stuff I did before Hatewave, I didn't really have my shit together as a drummer. I had a vibe, but I wasn't really tight. And Hatewave was the first band I was in where it was like, oh, you can't fuck these up. It has to be 8 times, and then you change to the next thing and play the break and da-da-da. So like, Hatewave was the first band I was in that really busted my balls, where I had to kind of be tight and like on the mark. And the original Hatewave was more noisy, sloppy, kind of like noisecore, like Fear of God, or like something like that, which is more kind of like, it doesn't matter if it's crappy and sloppy. It was more like grindcore influenced or whatever like that. But
yeah.
Mark, the guitar player of the second Hatewave, is like an actual heavy metal guy. So he wanted to be like tight and good and stuff like that. Mark's so funny. I love Mark. By the way, me and Sasha and Mark, I mean, we're still in contact. Like, we are talking about this reissue and all that stuff. I mean, we'll never play again because it's just like too much work and nobody cares. But what was I gonna say? Shit, I'm choking. You're making me dredge up all these memories now, and I'm like being flooded with like not thinking about this very often, and now I have to think about it. I don't know, like Sasha was just a weird guy, and he just wanted to make a band, and this is just what it turned into. I don't know. Nandor's attitude is that we turned into like a generic metal band, which he's entitled to that opinion.
Far from it.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, apparently it wasn't generic enough.
I was gonna say, were you like in the scene with that band Aborted Christ Child, and that's kind of how you were asked by Sasha to like join because he heard like that?
No, Aborted Christ Child was about the same time, and Aborted Christ Child was Mark and Nandor, who we've been talking about the whole time. Nandor was the original Hatewave drummer, and I think he probably wrote some of the songs of the original Hatewave, the early thing. And Mark was the guitar player to Aborted Christ Child. So, I mean, the connection was just that we had a small little crew of people that were into extreme metal in this kind of like art, noise rock kind of situation that we had in Chicago. So Aborted Christ Child was kind of more of a black metal band, but it had pretensions of being like a little bit technical, but not in like a wussy-ish way. It was more just like odd time changes and stuff. And I actually played in Aborted Christ Child once, but my bass wasn't plugged in. It was just my job to like look like I was playing the songs and like kind of lip syncing along to it. There was even a video of that for a long time, but that was just like, I was literally in Aborted Christ Child once and I didn't know the songs. And I basically just had like corpse paint on and was like pretending to play bass along with them or whatever.
You're just like plugged into the wall.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it was just like a shtick or whatever. So Aborted Christ Child was, I think it was about the same time, really. It might have been running alongside. That's a good question. I don't really remember. Nandor, like I said, tries to act like he invented everything, and everyone's just ripping him off or whatever. Aborted Christ Child. What year was that? That's really a good. I mean, I saw them a few times. They used to play gigs or whatever. I mean, they're saying the demo was 95. It could have been 95. It might have been before Hatewave. So, but Mark was in this crew of these guys that were called Run and Gun, which was like a loft of these filmmaker guys. Like, they're kind of connected now with like the Tim and Eric, kind of Eric Andre sort of realm of comedy or whatever.
Okay.
And they had a hilarious glam rock band called Hot Licks, HOTTLIXX. So Nandor and Mark were in this kind of like joke glam rock band. The Chicago scene had all kinds of stupid bands like this in the 90s because there were like gigs and there was a scene and the rent was cheap and everyone lived in the same neighborhood and stuff like that. So in a weird way, all these bands I'm talking about were all like in the same scene at the same time. But some of us liked extreme metal. So, I mean, that's just where we went with it.
Okay, that makes sense. And like I said at the beginning, I was like first finding out about the LP, and you had like a story about that too, where you guys were like basically had to go in twice and record that, right?
Yeah. When we did the LP in '98, Sasha really wanted to work with this guy Brian Griffin that was in the band Broken Hope, who was producing a lot of stuff. He's fine. We went in and we were kind of scrappy in our war metal way, and we set up our equipment and we played, and basically Brian comes out and shaking his head, and we're like, what? He's like, this sounds like shit, you can't do this. And we're like, what are you talking about? He's like, listen, and like sort of played it back, and I was like, I don't know, I guess okay, whatever. He was like, no, you guys got to go back, you got to go rehearse some more, you're not tight enough, and when you come back you're going to do it my way. And we're like, I kind of look at these guys and they're kind of like, oh, okay. So we rehearse, we come back, and basically how he wanted to do it was kind of like, like a deicide record or whatever, where they've got like a certain drum set up and you're going to play on certain drums with like the certain trigger and all this stuff. And then the guitar players played through the same guitar through the same setup, so they would have this kind of generic, like identical tone, like in each side of the speaker, like a deicide record or something like that. I don't think the Hatewave album is as harsh sounding as like a deicide record, but kind of like a generic death metal approach. So I was a little unsure about this, but I went along with it. So the drum takes on the album are all live, like 2-inch analog or whatever, and I'm proud of it. Like I played the shit out of the drums, fine. It wasn't like triggers per se. It was sort of like sound replacement for the kick drum because it's trying to get like a certain kind of metal kick drum tone.
Yeah.
And triggers don't play themselves. I mean, they're just when you click a thing, it plays a sample. So you got to still click the thing. It doesn't.
Yeah. If anything, it's a little harder because you have to be so precise.
Yep. Exactly. And I think there's a lot of people who don't understand. They hear triggers and they think it's sort of like playing itself. But what a trigger does is just, to trigger a sample just gets a consistency of tone and can cut through. That's all it is. So
yeah, and like
whatever.
in most live cases, they mix in the like acoustic drums with the trigger too. So it's, obviously you playing it, triggering it, that sound, and then also getting the original sound mixed in there too.
Exactly. I think at this point, the art of double kick drumming is so insane. I'm definitely not up to current standards. I mean, people are doing 16 notes at 300 BPM, and the reason, part of why they're using triggers is they're not playing that loud necessarily, but they are playing all the hits. And, like a lot of, I really have like 2000s double kick chops. Like I have to catch up a little bit. And I know how to do that, but I have to I'm an old fart. I got to commit to it. But, like sound placing the kick drum is just so the kick cuts through basically. But, and then those guys came in and did their guitars, vocals overdub. And at the end I was kind of like, but what about our harmonizer thing with the low end? He's like, it sounds like shit, can't do it. So the album doesn't really have the harmonizer, the big wall of fat on the bottom that we used to have, and that's on the demo. But I like the album. I think it's a good kind of grind death album or whatever, but it's definitely more generic than how we sounded because we were a scrappy band. We were kind of like these stray dogs, that banded together to play this extreme grinding shit or whatever. So
yeah, you can definitely hear those noise influences on the solos. I think it's at the end of Suicide and then at the beginning of Cock versus Cunt. Just has all that guitar noise sound, which is really sick because there's a band nowadays that kind of does that sort of style, but I was like, oh man, these guys were doing it in '98. It's crazy.
What's the band?
Concrete Winds.
Okay. I think that the influence for that was from late 80s and early 90s death metal solos, people like Deicide or Morbid Angel, where the stuff was just really kind of out jazz or something, like free jazz. They're just going fucking nuts. And I, being a free jazz fan, was definitely, that appealed to us, which was, I feel like our guitar player, Mark, is a really fastidious guitar player, and I don't know to what degree he came up with his solos ahead of time, but I think they're probably half improvised, half composed. Mark could really play the shit out of the guitar. He can play Yngwie Malmsteen or whatever. He's awesome. He's just a great guitar player, but the whole thing was to be chaotic, and so that's what the solos were. They were supposed to be chaotic and dissonant and angular and crazy. So
yeah, I guess that
we got that from
influence.
Stuff like Deicide. Yeah.
And then
I like the idea. I like the idea that in death metal the solos were just these chaotic, expressionistic, like Jackson Pollock, like nightmares of just improv or whatever.
Yeah, and then that's a good segue into getting into Encenathrakh a little bit. Well, that just sounds like just slam against the wall and seeing what sticks. And from what you were telling me before we were recording, it's fucking unbelievable.
Well, thank you. It was a big secret that who was in Encenathrakh for a long time because we didn't really want to be associated with any personalities. We just wanted to be this weird rogue band that came out of nowhere and played this really ridiculous music. And we used to lie and say we were this Columbus, Ohio band. Some people, I think on Encyclopedia Metallum, it still says we're from Ohio. But like, it's basically me and Mick Barr and Colin Marston, Paulo from he runs a label called P2. He's in a bunch of bands. That started, Encenathrakh started because we were really into brutal death metal, but we thought it was funny that people put so much effort into learning those songs when they were so convoluted and so atonal that you couldn't really tell what was going on. We just thought we would improvise the whole thing. So, Encenathrakh turned into this kind of like conceptual joke band of us improvising brutal death metal. And every record's been kind of different what the approach is. I mean, the first record is just all free improvised. Like we just went in and just start and stop at the same time. That was basically the only rule. We played a couple of live gigs, and basically the whole idea is just that we start and stop the songs at the same time. But other than that, it's just fucking noise, basically. We're just going nuts. We're going to play at Maryland Death Fest in 25, and we might do something a little different. We're definitely not going to rehearse, and we're definitely not going to have songs, but we're going to have like a way of navigating the starts and stops and stuff. So, I mean, Encenathrakh is sort of like us trying to get the end result of brutal death metal without all the tedious practicing.
Yeah, it's almost like exercising like drums and guitar, like scale runs and stuff like that. It's like almost like a sport.
Yeah, I mean, it's the hardest drumming I do, period.
Yeah, because you're
a
like
lot of crazy.
You're like gravity blasting and like it's crazy. Like just hearing the album and like I've only heard the first one, but comparing that to what you're doing in Hatewave, it's like you're doing exactly what each extremity of each genre needs. Where you're doing like a little bit more of like a skank kind of blast for Hatewave, and you're doing gravity blasts and like these like just crazy fills and adding all the cymbals in there too. So it's like a little bit more primitive, but extremely technical and right for Hatewave. And then you're just going like with the triggered sound and Encenathrakh and being a little bit more free with it that you can do with that kind of sound. And it's just awesome the diversity that you have in playing.
Cool. Well, I'm glad you feel that way. I'm just going to say that all the drumming on the Encenathrakh stuff is totally improvised. There's no rhyme or reason for it. It's just me going totally nuts and trying to be as asymmetrical as possible. So to ever relearn any of those parts is just beyond impossible. I mean, I could do it, but it would take too long and be too pointless because I could just make up more drums. But, there's an Encenathrakh Bandcamp page with pretty much everything on it. So every release we did has some kind of different way or approach of making the record. So I mean, it's a little tongue in cheek on some levels, but it is really serious on other levels because I mean it's really hard to play. It's not like easy. It's actually the hardest drumming I do, and I don't even play drums that often anymore. So it's really kind of busting my balls to do Encenathrakh. So, for the show in May, I got to get ready for that. Like, I got to be able to, I got to be able to like play this stuff. It's psycho. There is a playthrough video online of me playing to one of the third album songs, and everyone's like, "What? You actually play that stuff?" I'm like, "Yeah, of course I do." I mean, all the Encenathrakh stuff is the drums are just like what I played, like That's it. You know, there's no gimmickry or anything. It's just an extension of my kind of like free improvised, free jazz drumming or whatever, but in a death metal context. So.
Yeah, I was seeing that drum playthrough, and it looks like you were playing on like some like Simmons drum pads for the toms. It was crazy.
Well, we're trying to make a mockery of metal drum kits. So that was Colin Marston's idea of like, let's have like a ton of Simmons drum pads and then like 10,000 cymbals. I mean, it's just a shtick, you know. I mean, it's kind of like, but in a weird way, it's kind of trying to go in its own direction of death metalist folk art, you know, because sometimes I feel like some of the best metal is people that don't realize how fucked up it actually is. They think they're being like a normal band, but it's really a lot crazier than they think it is. And I like that. I think that's in Encenathrakh, everybody in the band likes it. Like the more crazy and outside it is, the more we like it. I mean, that's just great art, you know. But I think that a lot of brutal death metal bands are unintentionally avant-garde. I don't think they're trying to be experimental or anything like that. They're not trying to be postmodern. They do it accidentally because metal is so competitive and everyone's trying to push the bar so much that these weird mutations come out of heavy metal constantly. It's great. Love it. Metal's kind of the only contemporary music I listen to. I don't really like anything else that's coming out right now.
And I was gonna mention with Encenathrakh, it almost seems like a revitalization of like jam bands like Fish and Grateful Dead, where you guys are kind of just like doing random ass shit and like for 20 minutes or something, you know.
How dare you? I'm hanging up now. No, I'm just kidding. Well, I mean, Fish and the Grateful Dead just sound like a bunch of fucking idiots, like goofing, you know, like trying to play major scales or something. I mean,
Agreed.
I would say what Encenathrakh comes more out of, maybe unintentionally, is, you know, like hardcore free jazz, you know, like something like Interstellar Space by John Coltrane or Albert Ayler or Cecil Taylor, or these kind of endurance test speed, like free improvisation things. That was a different time and place. I mean, the real time for that was the 60s and the 70s, but that's a big influence on me. But at the same time, when I'm doing Encenathrakh, I'm not trying to be postmodern, you know, I'm not trying to do different genres or anything. It's definitely brutality, and it's in the metal idiom. But the approach is, well, why should I care what meter it's in? Why should I care if it's in 4/4 time or 13/8, or who gives a shit? I'm just going to play, and I'm just going to go as nuts as I possibly can the whole time, and that's the whole kind of Encenathrakh, you know?
Yeah, you're like using the tools of metal drumming, but just, you know, bending them a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm sure Encenathrakh is probably somewhat controversial. I mean, some people like it, and I'm sure some people hate it and think it's bullshit. I think for as little effort as we put into that band, it's been extremely successful. We never play. I mean, like, we play like once every 3 or 4 years or something like that. I mean, it's like, we don't rehearse. I don't even live in the same town as those guys anymore. Whatever, it's fine.
How did you like make there was a, you know, bands in between, like how did you, like, you know, the stepping stones to get into playing like brutal death metal from you know, your days in Hatewave?
Well, I'll say that since there's so much metal, it seemed a little redundant for me to be in a straight metal band, so I haven't really played in tons of what you would call, you know, like a straight heavy metal band. I mean, even Hatewave was a little mutant. Like, we never really fit in. I mean, the only guy that we ever got like great compliments from was Jesse Pintado from Napalm Death. I almost said Nuclear Death. Sorry, Nuclear Death were a big influence though. But Jesse, after we played with Napalm Death in '97, he was like, "Man, I want your demo tape." And we're like, "Fuck yeah!" We thought we really got some validation for that finally. But Hatewave, I don't feel like it was really like well received in its time, which happens or whatever. But I just played in a lot of weird bands. But I was in Behold the Octopus for a while. I play on the second Behold the Octopus album, which
Oh,
is called
damn.
Horror Ascension.
Yeah, they had a viral
And
video
basically,
back on YouTube. I remember.
yeah, right, like the worst band ever or whatever.
Yeah, they were like the nanonucleonic cyborg summoning. They go doodle-doo, 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 doodle-doo.
Well, yeah, I mean, I wasn't in that version of the band. That was a little more nerdy, like a little more weird science. Like I thought the second album is the brutal one that I played on, and but I don't know why I moved to New York in 2009 or something like that, and I was friends with Colin, and he just needed a drummer for Behold the Octopus, and I did it, and I was kind of like, as long as we make it brutal, and he's like, okay. So, the second Behold the Octopus record, I think, is the brutal one or whatever, and I played drums on it, but we rehearsed for almost a year before we played a gig, or maybe 2 years, was it? I don't remember, but it was like, that was really hard music to learn, and I eventually quit because it was just like too much, basically. I had too much going on in my life. I was like, I can't practice this shit 20 hours a week. It's like too much, But, me and Colin were tight, and we kind of vibed on some of the same stuff. And I feel like Encenathrakh started maybe 2013 or something like that. And we were sitting around with Mick Barr, and we were kind of just stoked about brutal death metal, and we were just sitting around going like, why don't we just make it up as we go along? I mean, that was just it, And Paulo kind of came into the picture. There was a band before Encenathrakh called Procatricist, it was basically just a band that was it was me and Mick and two different guys. Eston Brown was the singer, who's been in like a lot of bands. But it was basically just an improvised brutal death metal band. But we didn't really steal the concept from that. It was just a thing that we wanted to do. Of course, Nandor, who was in the first Hatewave, thinks we ripped off the idea from him because he thinks he invented everything. It always goes back to Nandor Devai. He invented everything, and everyone's just ripping every concept off from him. But literally, I think it was just this case where me and Mick and Colin were sitting around going like, why don't we just make this shit up as we go along? Like, why do we need to rehearse this? So that's a pretty simple concept.
You were saying with each album you had a different approach. So like the first one was you laying down the drum tracks and then they just wrote to it, right? Or
well, that was the second album. The first album was just totally improvised, and we might have all done it at the same time, and those were just the takes. The second album was recorded where me and Mick and Colin went in and recorded as a trio, and we improvised, and then they deleted their guitar tracks. Then they spent a year learning and writing guitar tracks to my totally asymmetrical, insane drums that made no sense. So that was actually kind of like the hardest work Encenathrakh's ever done to make an album. And then Paulo came in at the end and sang. The third album was done in reverse, where we did a cappella vocals, and then guitars were added on top of that. And then the drums were done last, and the drums were done with me like staring over at the computer monitor from across the room and trying to see where it started and stopped vaguely. And that's the playthrough video that's online, is me like kind of like looking at the video screen, like trying to figure out where these songs start and stop. So yeah, every time we've had an album, there's been some kind of concept about how we make it, and we haven't done anything in a little while. But I think we have a bunch of albums that are done that haven't been released because, it's like every once in a while we put out a Encenathrakh record, but we rarely play. I mean, we haven't played in years at this point. I guess the last time we played was when we did third album, which is probably like 3 or 4 years old at this point. But we're going to play in May at Maryland Death Fest, so there's that. So whatever. I mean, we're all friends. It's cool.
Yeah,
but yeah, Encenathrakh's not about practice. It's like against practice. If we practice, we're recording an album,
Yeah.
So
I love the song titles and album titles on the Encenathrakh, and it reminds me, in a sense, of the Black Legions, because I know you had mentioned that there is a language to it. and
Yeah.
I don't know what that language is, but by reading the titles, you get kind of a feeling out of it, even if you can't get
Yeah, I'm
an
glad
actual
you.
meaning out of it, right?
Yeah, it is consistent, and that's interesting. The Black Legions thing that's actually that might even be the direct influence on it. I'll bet you anything. But Mick Barr comes up with all the titles for the Encenathrakh stuff, and I bet you he probably is in a way like influenced by the Black Legion stuff in terms of that. But Mick has
Hmm.
always had. I mean, his classic band is called Orth Realm, which was just him playing guitar with the drummer, and they were playing these like insanely non-repeating, like just like riff salad. Oh, they're so great. Um, but he always was into inventing languages. So the Hatewave titles are all based on these series of phonetic like syllables that he came up with. So why it seems consistent to you is because he's reusing all these syllables and stuff like that. So that's actually I'm glad that that comes across to you because that was actually Mick's intent is to make it like a consistent almost language with the titles. So that's good.
Yeah, no, it
Yay.
definitely comes. It definitely reads. Well, I'm using the word
Yeah.
read loosely here because again, I'm not actually reading it, but just by the tones and the sounds that those words create when you read them, even if you don't know what they mean, they give a certain feeling to them, and that's again very similar to the Black Legions. You don't know exactly what it means, but you kind of get the vibe from them, and it comes across well.
Cool. Well, I think there's actually a lyric video online.
That's awesome.
You should look that up. I mean, we've tried to do every joke we could possibly do. We had an AI version that's like a 10-hour. Somebody made like a 10-hour Encenathrakh track in AI that's online. I mean, we had nothing to do with that other than we were the raw material for it, but it's hilarious. Um, you know, it's it's funny. Like we do these kind of joke concept things, but I mean, we care about it. We really like this music, and sometimes we put really hard work into it. Although sometimes it's on the production angle, not so much like rehearsing or anything. So, I mean, it just goes to show you that a joke can be pretty serious. If you want to make it serious, and Incenith is
It's a
something we
joke
care
band
about.
done right, right? Like it's
Yeah, exactly. It's
even
got
though
some
there's
angles.
humor and there's stuff in the background that makes you laugh. The music is actually there to listen to and doesn't come. The music itself doesn't come across as a joke, even if some aspects of it are. And that's what makes
Well,
a good
that's
joke band to me. It's still listenable
yeah.
and still enjoyable,
Well,
and
but
not just sounds like.
isn't that the whole point of extreme metal? That it's so outrageously extreme, it's kind of funny in a weird way. I mean, I always thought that was the appeal of death metal was that it was so extreme and almost like insane, like how extreme it is sometimes. I mean, like
It,
sadistic execution, a
It
Yeah.
band I
is, but
love.
sometimes bands that either do a joke or take a concept to the point where they focus more on that joke or concept rather than music itself, and then it's just like you have this concept that's overly developed or this joke that's just overly jokey, for lack of a better term, and you listen to the
What's an
music and
example?
it's like it's an afterthought, and you're like, well, this isn't. It might be funny for a couple of listens, but
Right.
it's not sustainable.
I'm kind of
Whereas
thinking
Well, I
of
was in a
like
band like that called 7,000 Dying Rats, so yeah, I totally know.
I was gonna say it comes to mind with like crossover thrash or something where it's a little bit more funny. Like I guess like spastic blur and stuff.
yeah, but I think they have the
Sure.
musicianship to back it up,
No, yeah,
especially with
they're
Spastic
like a
Blur.
they're like a good example of it, but there's more that are
Ah,
a bit leaning on the wrong side of it.
I wonder. I
I
wonder
just
who is on the bad side.
I just think like that kind of stuff is a young person's game. I mean, when you're young and you haven't been kicked in the face a million times, like everything's kind of like a big laugh. Like you don't have a ton of wisdom or experience, so you just write these like things that make you laugh or whatever. I mean, humor's good though. I mean, but I see your point. I mean, who's on the bad side of it? Yeah, like what do you consider to be like a bad joke band?
Man, I'm trying to remember. We Dan would show me some in high school, but the only one that kind of sticking is spastic blur, which was like a good one.
Well,
So
well,
that's why
we
it
kind of
stuck.
did that
Sure.
when we were younger with Droom. We had all these stupid song titles and dumb lyrics.
Hmm.
Yeah. So I guess that is true. It does feel like a young man's thing. Even just
I
playing
was in a
that
band.
crossover thrash, you know.
I was in a band for a little while called Vomitatrix that was kind of a parody of grindcore bands because our all our songs were sort of based on a conceptual thing of what if the count off is the whole song, or what if it's just the intro, or what if it's just the ending, or it was kind of like our LSD version of a grindcore band or something like that. But once again, it was a it was a joke and there was black humor involved in it. But when it got on stage, it was 100% serious about shredding. You know, I mean, I don't know. I think there's room for everything, but I see your point. I think there's a lot in a lot of my music. There's a underlying black humor of some sort usually, but then you've got to play awesome music. So you know, otherwise it's just a joke, right?
I think you are right about the whole death metal concept. I mean, if you really think about it, it is funny, and it not only is it funny, but it's very strange. It's like you're kind of barking into the fucking microphone, and it's like, what kind of guitar riffs are those? It's just a very strange concept, going from heavy metal to death metal all of a sudden. It's very I don't know. It's very alien sounding.
Yeah, doing like the cricket vocals and
Yeah, it's just weird.
the slams and yeah.
Slam is hilarious. I mean, I laugh at it 100%. I mean, I can't even relate to slam. Like that doesn't come from any planet that I live on. But you know, I saw Peeling Flesh a couple of years ago, like I was saying earlier, and those guys came in halfway through a fest and just wiped the floor with everybody. It was so insane. And obviously, they're like really into rap and hip hop, and they're it was like not my cultural touch point for things, but there was something so crazy and folk art and insane about it. I loved it. I mean, I haven't seen those guys since because now they're like just like they always sell out everything, and I don't. You know, it's like whatever. But I'm just glad I saw Peeling Flesh 2 years ago before they were like this big band or whatever, and they really came on and they just destroyed everything. But slam is so insane. Like I kind of can't relate to it, but that's why I like it because it's just like an alien tongue to me. Like whatever.
Yeah, it's such a weird. I don't know if it's like an offshoot. It's just like a congruent. Like,
I think it started as an offshoot. Now it's like its own thing.
well, it's like it spawned out of brutal death metal, which was
Yeah.
more had a direct lineage, and then
Hmm.
slam was like the redheaded stepchild of like hardcore and brutal death metal, where it's like no one wanted either of them, but now they have their own like slam worldwide niche going on.
But I feel like slam has a lot to do with hip hop or something.
Oh yes, for
Like
sure. That and new metal.
you know, yeah, exactly. So I mean, of course, not all of it's good, but sometimes slam is accidentally awesome. Like what are some? I don't know. I mean, you know, God, what is that fucking band called? Afflictive. What is that? Like sometimes I find these dollar metal CDs that I was saying earlier that are just you look at them and you're like, oh boy, this is going to be something. And you're right, it's like totally brain dead to the point where you're like, yeah, this is like the real shit. You know, what is this?
Yeah, there's like
I mean, I have a hard time. Afflictive emasculation, like awesome, totally dumb, like the dumbest, most primitive, brutal death metal with like slam parts, but like it's almost not music. I mean, it's like, oh, what are these guys thinking? They must be really stupid. Like, I don't know. It's pretty awesome. There's no irony. It's like, and even their jokes are kind of like bad ones that aren't even funny ones. They're like, oh, what's wrong with these guys? But I like this kind of stuff. It's just really pure and fucked up, and it's not musical. It's like some other thing. I don't know.
yeah, it almost seems like my perspective on it is more like I'd rather hear that than what's going on with like revival bands like trying to do like old school death metal still, where these guys are kind of pushing the envelope in a new new waters.
I am so disinterested in listening to Blood Incantation. Like, I
Yeah,
can't. I do not give a shit about that. I mean, they might even not be that bad, but like, why do I need to hear like a watered down hipster version of 90s death metal? I heard 90s death metal. It was awesome. Like,
Yeah.
I don't need to hear like the wish.com version of Hammer Smashed Face or whatever. It doesn't really matter. Like, who cares? Like, dumb. So I don't know. I don't really pay attention to the status quo. And I don't really fit into death metal. Like, I'm not like a metalhead or something. I mean, I don't really pretend to be one. I mean, I roll pretty deep on death metal, but it's not ironic. I don't know, man. I don't worry about it too much. I just like what I like and don't worry about it.
Yeah, because I've heard your other band. It was I think it was Flying Ludenbach. That like you're playing still extreme metal over that. There's like sax going on, and is that more like the free jazz project?
Well, Flying Ludenbachers, I guess, after I die, will be seen as like my main project or whatever. But I started that back in 1991, and it was really into free jazz like Albert Eiler and stuff like that. And then it kind of turned into, I got bit by the death metal bug, and I started doing these like kind of like blast beat kind of things, and it was more of a noise rock band, and then it turned back into a free jazz band, and it turned into like this like atonal prog band, and then it broke up, and like right now it's kind of like a prog band shredding all the time, playing all the wrong notes, and it's almost kind of like acid frat boys or something. I mean, it's just like it's basically just takes everything I like that everyone hates and put it all into like one thing and just shove it down people's throats. So it's kind of like a really dissonant prog band that has some blast beats, and it's kind of like no wave and extreme metal and some like free improvising, and I don't know. It's just me like putting everything I like into a blender and making it really like fucked up. So I don't know. It's definitely not a metal band. I mean, it's got some metal around the edges. It's just more of like this rogue, like weird no wave thing or something like that. But
Yeah,
I don't know.
I was gonna say that I listened to Revenge. Is that like a good jumping in point?
That's primitive. I mean, that was recorded in 1996, so I mean that was a million years ago. We were definitely pretty crude musicians, but the opening song "Storm of Shit" is really influenced by like blasphemy and stuff like that. You know, just really like boneheaded riffs and kind of like sped up skank beats and stuff like that. So I don't know. That was when I started getting into playing blast beats, like 1995 or so. Like, I don't know. Wow, that's a long time ago. I sort of remember it.
Well, it's all recorded, so.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Flying Ludenbachers by 95, I was really into death metal, and I wanted to incorporate that into the music, but I couldn't. We weren't good enough musicians that we were ever going to play like straight ahead grind or death metal, so we did sort of our crazy no wave version of it. And we always, at that point, we had a pentagram flag behind us, and, like all this kind of shit. So I don't know. I mean, we were just trying to be off-putting and confrontational in a different way. That's all I can say about it.
Was that like influenced by like Naked City and like Zorn projects?
I don't like John Zorn. I think John Zorn is kind of the gateway drug for a lot of people that they never get past. I thought Naked City was very cheesy because I wasn't really into these kind of like, and now we're going to have this like ska part or polka part or any of this kind of stuff. Like, I just wanted the brutality. And I think Naked City was more into these kind of like references of genres and stuff like that. And I just thought they sounded cheesy. I was into the stuff that John Zorn ripped off. Like, I was more into the second Napalm Death album and Albert Eiler. I wasn't into Naked City sort of like putting them together as postmodern joke. So Zorn and I don't like each other. And I will someday piss on his grave. and you can put that in the interview if you want. Um, John Zorn can eat a dick forever, as far as all I care, and I'll go on record saying that. But
All
I don't
right.
personally like that guy, and he doesn't like me. But I think part of it was that I didn't like being compared to Naked City because I thought I was doing my own thing, and I thought they were cheesy. And it got back to him, and he doesn't like that. He's kind of like a megalomaniacal egomaniac. So he's got like blacklists. I'm definitely on it, but um, if you're intrigued by Naked City, what I can say is there's a lot better music out there that's crazier than that.
Yeah, let me know. I'm looking up Albert Eiler, and looks like Spiritual Unity is the one coming up. Is that a good album to check out?
Um, you could start there. I mean, Albert Eiler has a bunch of different periods, but he was a real outsider artist. My favorite stuff, I mean, if you go online right now, there's finally video footage of Albert Eiler that's finally been released. And there's a Berlin 1966, a half-hour concert by his band. And I'd be curious what you make of it because it's pretty psychotic. Um, the musical parts are pretty melodic. They're almost kind of like sing-songy. But when the improvisations come on, it was kind of the most extreme shit going back then. And it's really crazy. It's kind of schizophrenic, but yeah, I'm more into the second Napalm Death album and Albert Eiler than I am Naked City. I'll put it that way. So,
Oh, okay.
but yeah, I'll give you a list. I mean, there's a lot of rogue things. Zorn just gets like credit for a lot of things that he ripped off and stole. I mean,
Like how you
like if
put it. How you put it was. It seemed like it was like, you know, straightforward, and then they'll go down this one avenue, come back, walk down this street, come back. Where when I listened to Revenge, it seemed like you said, um, like all your interests just filtered through brutality. Like it was. It seemed more
you know,
like genuine, like aggression there, rather than like, oh, let's do what these other bands are doing.
well, yes, and that's good. To sum it up, Naked City was a bunch of smiling jazz guys that heard like a grindcore record for 2 seconds and were like, "Oh, I can do this." And I was actually listening to that music and really like into it. I mean, okay, like I'm sure John Zorn was listening to like early earache records and thought they were novel and stuff like that. But his band, those guys don't like that stuff. They're just like these like jazz guys that he hired to like play this stuff that he wrote. So I mean, in a way, like Naked City is kind of the ultimate dilettante band. It's actually is postmodern, and it's kind of like appropriating grindcore as opposed to actually doing it.
Yeah.
And I was more like influenced by death metal and grind and wanted to do something different with it that was coming out of like no wave and punk and stuff like that. So um, the sense of humor was different, the irony was different, the intent was different. So I don't know. To have saxophone on top of the Flying Ludenbacher stuff was just to have horrible noise on it. It wasn't necessarily a reference to free jazz per se. Like
Yeah,
now
when
we're playing
the
free jazz.
when that first note from the sax came up, it was almost as progressive and like aggressive as like a vocal shriek. I was kind of thrown off by it. I was like, is that a vocal or oh no, it's sax.
Yeah, that's me blowing my brains out. Yeah, but I was never a particularly good saxophone player. I mean, I play on a few things. I played with a lot of great saxophone players, and I'm definitely not one of them. But at the time, it was a punk approach of like, I want to have this Albert Eiler style like intensity on top of the music, cutting through a blast beat, But it wasn't really about. And now it's jazz, and now it's metal. Like I don't like these kind of hybridizations. Well, I don't like these kind of like compartmentalizations. I wanted to take the elements and put them into a thing that was a unified concept, not like here's jazz and here's metal. That just seems real dorky to me. It's like just make it music, just make it awesome, make it cool. Like who fucking cares what it is?
Yeah,
So
because I know like some like jazz records are a little bit more on the fringes, like uh, Man Dance by Ronald Shannon Jackson. Like that's
yeah,
like more of like a drum led band. Like that's just fucking insane. And Hermeto
sure.
Pascal, like that's also another artist that I go to for just bad shit like free jazz kind of stuff. But I gotta check
Well,
out
I
Albert
grew up.
Eiler.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up listening. Well, Ronald Shannon Jackson played with Albert Eiler.
Oh, really?
So yeah, there's a link there. He was in his band in 1966 for a
Hmm.
little while. And Ronald Shana Jackson also played with Cecil Taylor and Ornette Coleman. He's kind of one of the cats. And I first got that Man Dance record when I was in high school. I paid like $3 for it or whatever. And that is a great record that is really hyper composed and crazy solos, and it's kind of catchy. It just goes to show you that what's interesting about these things is to take inspiration and turn it into something new rather than being like, I'm mixing up genres, or this is this part and this is this part. I think it's the job of musicians to take their influences and turn it into something new.
Yeah, like
um
filter it through your own lens
yeah,
rather than just being like gimmicky.
yeah, exactly. I mean, to me, Naked City is like the Weird Al Yankovic of this music or something. I don't really take it seriously. It's a gateway drug. I mean, they're more like Fish or the Grateful Dead than anything. I mean, like, come on, whatever, lame.
There's also
Anyways,
another band. I think you probably like them if you haven't heard them. It's two musicians. One's on the piano, and the other guy's just doing drums, and it's just like crazy kind of grind blast drums. The band's called
uh,
Pavixki.
what's it called?
Pavixki. Pivixki.
Never heard of them.
They're from
When are they from?
Australia. Australia came out '09.
Huh.
But yeah,
Well,
this is really like interesting kind of concoction because it isn't really like aping anything. It's just these two instruments playing together in a really extreme way with their original tones rather than like going for something really aggressive.
yeah. Well, that makes sense. I mean, Cecil Taylor is another guy that is a big influence on me in terms of free jazz, which is Anthony Pateras. Yeah, I know this guy. I've met this guy before.
Oh,
Sure.
okay.
Um, yeah, like we've run past each other. Cecil Taylor was somebody who was really grinding the fuck out of the piano. I mean, he's kind of the legend of just playing the shit out of the piano. But Cecil Taylor was legendary for very long, very intense concerts. Where he's just playing the absolute shit out of the piano as fast as he possibly can for like 2 hours straight. I mean, he's just another legend of that kind of music. But like for him to do that in jazz in the 60s and 70s is a different vibe
Oh
than
yeah.
being influenced by death metal. But the intent is, I could send you some links of some Cecil Taylor stuff. There's a lot of new videos coming out now of classic stuff where it's just like, I mean, this guy's going fucking nuts. Like,
Yeah.
it's
Send it my
unbelievable.
way.
Oh yeah, I'll send you some links when we get off. But to me, like, the spirit of really hardcore free jazz is the same spirit as crazy death metal or
Yeah.
no
Exactly.
wave or noise or any
It's
of that
almost
stuff.
like comparable to like brutal death metal in that sense too.
Yeah,
Because even in like a studio level, it seems like these bands are getting together and just like getting albums together with just different musicians and seeing all these different variations of hands in the pot to get a different sound,
right.
akin to like jazz, you know?
Well, this is why I don't play in straight death metal bands, because there's no reason to, because there's 10 million great death metal bands. It's like
Yeah.
super redundant for me to do. So, if I ever did anything that was nearing extreme death metal, extreme metal, it was always had a twist on it, because the idea was to do something that isn't being done the same way at the same time. And I feel like there's bands that kind of picked up a little bit on Encenathrakh, like Effluence and stuff like that, and
Yeah,
it's
definitely
totally fine.
influence.
Yeah, I mean, Effluence is kind of more famous than Encenathrakh because it's kind of like the second guy gets the notoriety, but like the originator doesn't. I mean, I like Matt. I don't have any problem with Effluence at all. Effluence is definitely a little more into John Zorn than I am. That's for sure. But like, because he has a little bit of his sort of like jazz saxophone thing on top. But like it's totally fine. I mean, Encenathrakh made a comp of free death metal bands like that, and we are half of them. Like, it's just us under different names and stuff like that. But there's like Lucid Panacea and like these kind of like weird, kind of almost like free-ish kind of like grind noise bands. I mean, we're all good with that, But I think it's not like. I mean, one of the inspirations for this is obviously Anal Cunt, like early Anal Cunt, where they didn't have any songs, or noisecore, like Fear of Death or Fear of God. Sorry, not Fear of Death, Fear of God, and like 7 Minutes of Nausea and all these kind of things like that. I mean, it's all part of a lineage or whatever.
Yeah, Seth Putnam, the greatest metal comedian.
Arguably, I mean, I knew the guy somewhat, and he had different phases. At the end, it was definitely, he was trying to alienate everybody, including me. So, I mean, whatever. Complicated guy.
Yeah.
Complicated topic, yes. But, oh yeah, Seth Putnam was definitely, they broke the mold with that guy. That's for sure.
Yeah, and I really enjoy his band, Full Blown AIDS, too. They got that song with Thor.
Yeah, I mean, he was a character. I'm not going to indict myself by defending him too much. He knew what he was doing. I mean, at the end, he was definitely trying to offend people and being an edgelord, and it was kind of like his G.G. Allen worship thing kind of took over. Complicated guy, though. I don't know. That's a whole different subject altogether. Seth Putnam.
Yeah.
I saw him be good and I saw him be bad. I'll leave it that way.
But I guess at this point, we're gonna get more into like the demo talk. So before we do that, let's take a little break, like 5 minutes,
Sure.
And then come back.
Yeah, I need more whiskey.
All right, we'll be right back. All right, we're back from our break, and take two,
Cracking.
Weasel.
Nice. What do you want to talk about?
I think we're getting into a little bit of we're getting into a bit of like genre names and stuff coming after the fact, rather than being established during like bands' times, like with blasphemy and stuff.
We were talking about war metal.
Yeah.
Well, the war metal term in the late 90s wasn't very popular. And it really started to pick up pace in the last half of the zeros. And I think Nuclear War Now Productions kind of popularized that kind of music making, which is kind of like, I think war metal ultimately is kind of black metal without the sort of flutes and fairies, like the like, like that kind of stuff. Just the blasting, like harsh parts of war metal. I think like Zyklon B, their first EP was like real war metal sound of like this kind of like scathing black metal, but without the goth parts.
Definitely, yeah.
Tanks and machine guns and that kind of stuff. Or Conqueror. I mean, we were on Conqueror when that came out. We're like, yeah, this is the shit. But like you were saying, Blasphemy, they were just kind of thought they were a death metal band, right?
Yeah.
Like the war metal term came a lot later. And Yasuke from Nuclear War Now Productions, he thinks the only war metal bands are Beherit, Conqueror, and Blasphemy. He's kind of a purist about it, which I actually respect. I think that's fine. But as we know, like that kind of war metal sound, which is kind of like black metal without the flutes and fairies and stuff like that, that's kind of what war metal is. It's kind of just blasting, grinding stuff, like kind of dissonant and unpleasant and, whatever. But we're just talking about how the names of genre titles drift. Like they don't always mean the same thing to everybody. And we were talking about like how punk, what that means to somebody who thinks Fall Out Boy is punk. It's different than someone who thinks like the Electric Eels are punk. You know what I mean? Like it just doesn't matter. It's whatever. It's fine. I don't like Fall Out Boy.
That was
They suck.
Emo or something. Maybe not not emotive, but like whatever My Chemical Romance would be considered. Maybe
Just
they're in
like-
the
But
same
even
camp.
emo, because I'm
It's
old,
punk,
in
yeah.
the 80s, we thought emo was like Rites of Spring and stuff like that.
Yeah,
you
they're
know, like,
awesome.
Yeah, Paul's band, they cover that. They cover one of the Rites of Spring songs.
yeah, you know, emo in the 80s was sort of seen as like punk that had this kind of like extroverted, kind of almost embarrassingly emotional kind of like thing
Yeah.
to it, like a display, like fainting and like, oh, you know, like almost kind of like a feminine approach or something like that. But what emo punk turned into is just like rich kids from the suburbs doing this kind of like 50s doo-wop kind of like garbage. I mean, whatever,
Dancey
you know.
stuff. It's kid stuff.
Yeah, it's for children. It's for little children. I mean,
Yeah,
whatever.
we-
Little,
we-
All well
little
and good.
shitty babies.
We need some man punk.
Yeah, man. I mean, my go-to is like Poison Idea or something like that. Like that's what I'm into. A bunch of like 6 foot tall fat guys on drugs, like you know, that's what I'm into. Like,
I like that big fat guy from Tad, that grunge band. He was cool.
oh God, yeah, he was bigger than all of them, I think. But at one point, Poison Idea were the biggest, fattest, most drug addicted like band on the planet. I mean, they had 5 guys who were all at least 6 feet tall, at least all weighed like 250, 300 pounds. Like, yeah, like real
If you're
shit
gonna be
bands.
fat, be on drugs too.
Exactly, because it worked out very poorly. You have to get like your legs amputated and
You
stuff.
can't keep up with that kind of. If you're in that shape.
Oh, I mean, Jerry A, what a legend. I mean, you should read his biography. It is just, whoa, dude. I can't even believe that guy is alive. Hats off to Jerry A from Poison Idea. You made it. You lived. Like, whoa. Insane.
I forget which cool
actually.
black metal band like Poison Idea. It might have been who the hell was it? It might have been GBK or something. I'm not sure.
No, it was Pro Fanatica.
Pro Fanatica. There you go.
Oh, sure. I mean, well, Pro Fanatica, I mean, I had the single with their penises hanging out in the 90s. I mean, that's like a classic one. Pro Fanatica, I mean, Nandor has played with Paul Ledney. I mean, those guys have a whole relationship in upstate New York. I mean, but Pro Fanatica was definitely anti-music when it came out. Like, it was black metal, but it was black metal stripped down to the dumbest. Like, you know, like Vaughn and Pro Fanatica, just like 2 chords over and over again. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
Vaughn's
some
kind of
folk
amazing
art
in
shit.
that way. They're one of the first like extreme evil, totally shit primitive bands. I like that stuff.
Yeah, well, I was really into the Havo Hedge records when those came out in the 90s. The Flying Lutenbachers covered Black Perversion because we were just like, this is the opposite of music. It's just noise, you know, like pretty awesome. But yeah, that Black Perversion is just like noise, a goblin choking, and then just like a drum beat, like boop, bop, boop, bop. That's it. It's like the opposite of music. Pretty cool. Kind of a no wave thing, unintentionally. I think Havo Hedge was Paul Ledney from Pro Fanatica just trying to make his music even more primitive and like anti and blasphemic, and you know, I think Catholic priests molesting boys is like the big root of black metal ultimately.
Mm-hmm.
Like child abuse, like Catholic child abuse. It's kind of sad, really, but I think that's like the roots of black metal, really. If you think about it.
Black metal heroes.
Kind of. Well, it's a hatred for Christianity because of the perversion of like the Catholic Church and its silent acceptance of like molesting choir boys and you know like all that stuff. It's kind of fucked up.
Yeah, I thought it was like also the sort of takeover in like those Scandinavian countries of like that being the most like dominant religion versus like their like I guess pagan roots or something.
Yeah, well, I mean, traditionally, countries like Sweden or Norway are very atheistic. I mean, they're some of the most atheistic, and Finland are like some of the most atheistic countries
They're cold and
Yeah, I think
calculated.
like the second wave of black metal was just kind of like a weird outbreak of hating Christianity and well, the church burning. I mean, I was into that shit when it happened. It was pretty interesting to see on the news that these black metal bands were burning churches down and stuff. And actually, I remember in the mid '90s there was a news thing on in Chicago, and I feel like they were talking about a church got burned down in Chicago, and they showed a picture of the church, and it said "Burzum" on it in spray paint. I was kind of like, this is like black metal stuff, yeah, like cool. I mean, I didn't really like Burzum, but I got the joke, I got the reference. It was pretty cool actually. I don't like religion. I think religion is a bad thing, and it should be done away with. But I'm not going to enforce it because I'm not a fascist. But whatever. I don't think religion does any good to the world at all. Pretends it does, but it's bad. It's cause of a lot of war and injustice. So don't know.
That's what caused the California fires. You know that, right, Paul?
What?
Religion.
Yeah.
Religion.
Black metal. Yeah, sure.
Those poor
Yeah, I don't know about
alpacas.
that.
Yeah, I was gonna.
Complex world we live in. So how does this relate to the Hatewave demo? That's
This is what I was gonna
That
do.
sounds like a genre kind of.
The fourth track, "Slit the Catholic Throat."
yeah.
Well, on the
It's real
album
subtle.
anyway.
It's real subtle.
It
Real
is,
subtle
it
one.
is a good title.
Yeah, what's that about?
Beats me. No lyrics.
No, I know what it's about. Yeah.
But yeah, so I brought this originally the album on to talk about, and after connecting with Weasel, he's like, "Oh, I kind of think that we're a closer, rendition of our sound is represented better on the demo from '97." So I listened to that and I did a quick pivot, and I was like, "Yep, we're actually going to talk about this one because it just sounds a little bit more." Well, a lot more like raw and simultaneously chaotic but controlled with how tight everything is, at least from what I'm hearing. And I brought this guy or this demo up, and I don't think Dan or Fred have heard of it before, right?
Nope.
No, you introduced this. When was that? Like
Cool.
2-3 weeks ago?
Yeah,
Brand-
like maybe
yeah,
like a
new to
month.
me. I had never heard of this band before. Weirdly enough, I had heard of the that improvisational brutal death metal band. I forget
Yeah.
where, but I had heard of you guys before in that sense.
Cool.
And what's kind of crazy is I didn't realize that I see two of the guitar players are in Kralis, which is interesting.
Yep. But also, Kralis is a weird band. They kind of just do whatever they want. They don't really care what it is. It's not really black metal. I mean, I don't know what it is. They're just, it's just a thing. But I've known those guys forever. I've known those guys since the 2000s. I mean, whatever. They're like friends of mine.
Yeah, I remember they started to get big. Well, I remember a lot of people started to like them around maybe 2010, 2011. They had a lot of, getting some waves there.
I feel like Kralis is a band that people who don't like extreme metal like, or something. It's like their black metal band that they get or something, which is a little awkward and weird. And I don't know. I mean, Kralis goes out of the lines. I mean, those guys don't really give a shit. They don't care about following rules or whatever. They're just into what they're into, and it's fine.
Yeah, I can say too about the Hatewave stuff. I like that logo. It's pretty. It looks good.
Oh yeah, we were talking about that too.
The logo was originally drawn by Sasha, the singer, and I thought it was too sloppy, so I kind of like cleaned it up for the releases or whatever. And I think he was a little like bummed out about that, but whatever, it's a thing. There's actually somebody was asking me about Hatewave T-shirts recently, and I was like,
that
no,
was me.
yeah, right. Oh yeah, that's very recently also, like yesterday. But yeah, there's only 2 Hatewave T-shirts. John Dwyer from the OCs calls me one day and he goes, "Hey man, I'm making some Hatewave T-shirts." I'm like, "Okay, go ahead." And he's like, I made two, one for you and one for me. So I've got like the only Hatewave t-shirt or whatever. John Dwyer's got the other one. He made it.
When you said that, I thought you meant there's two designs. You meant there's actually just two.
Yeah, there's actually just two shirts, like two Hatewave shirts.
Got it.
Yeah, period. Yeah. So, and if there's other ones, they're total bootlegs. Like I know nothing about them, so whatever.
But Fred, what do you think of this? Well, I guess you listened to the album first and then this. Like, how did that compare?
The aggression is obviously way. Well, I don't know if necessarily if it's the aggression as much as the production that makes it so much more devastating, I guess, because the performance on the album is equally aggressive. It just doesn't have that gritty, messy, raw sound to it as much as the demo. So, but I enjoyed both. Like, I liked how streamlined the album sounded. But like I mentioned earlier, when it comes to what I like, it tends to be the raw, dirty stuff. So yeah, the demo is probably what I would gravitate towards more. But that's not to say anything negative about the album. I think the album sounded fucking great. These were both new to me from when Paul brought them up as the picks for this week. So they were pleasant surprises. I enjoyed them.
Yeah, as soon as I heard them, I had to go on Discog, get a copy of the CD.
Yeah,
the demo is dirtier, and it has the edge because we're playing pretty much live in the studio, and the studio album was more kind of like okay, we've got the drum tracks, now let's overdub the guitars and make them perfect. So I mean, your instincts are right on that. I'll just say that.
Cool. Yeah, no, but
yep.
they're both great, and yeah, when Paul got the album off the Discogs and he posted a picture in our group chat, that was the first time I'd seen anything about it, which is surprising because I'd listened to the Tumult discography before, and I guess it just never caught my attention. I guess so. I didn't like, you know, when you look through labels releases and you pick out names and you check them out, and then you just never get around to some, and this is one of the ones I didn't get around to. So
shame.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a weakling right there.
You know, towards the end, we were picking up a little steam, and we were getting kind of like better shows and stuff. But I don't know, there were like some personal problems in the band, and it just kind of at one point just kind of dissolved or whatever. But we never really fit in. We just kind of did our thing and played when we could, and that was what happened. So I don't know. It's funny that people still care about it because they didn't really care about it that much when we actually did it. And I'm just glad that the music stands up, you know, like I'm glad about it. So.
Okay. So I'm not the only one freaking out about Hatewave.
No, I mean, like I said, I mean, the reissue is this thing that Andy from Mortville Noise insisted. He's like, I love the Hatewave stuff. I want to reissue it. I want to do like the ultimate, like all the cool outtakes, like have interviews, like all that stuff. So I'm kind of like in low gear. I mean, I've been killing myself for the last 35 years doing music to like almost no one and no one caring. So I'm like pretty burnout. I mean, I have to try to like knock this thing out like really soon because we did the transfers. Like I just gotta like step it up. So in a weird way, you guys actually caring about this record is like helping it get reissued. So thank you. And I'm trying my hardest to like knock this thing out.
Oh yeah, give you some fuel the Hatewave.
Yeah, being like the best kept secret in the music business for the last 35 years has taken a toll on me. I'm like pretty tired, but like, you know, I try to make these things count, and you know, my heart's still in it, I'll put it that way.
Yeah, we were talking about Nuclear War Now earlier too. I was like, I can imagine this being a perfect fit in there, but I think I was thinking that before you mentioned that it was already being reissued through someone else.
Yeah, I just whatever happens. I mean, I always feel like my stuff is on the wrong shelf, like continually. Like oh, it should have been this, it should have been that. But, you know, you just kind of you go where the love is, you know? So, I mean, Andy really wants to do this record. He's like so committed to it. And I've been like really dragging my feet. I got to like do it. But, you know, I like Nuclear War now. It's all good. I mean, I there was a point where I bought a lot of stuff on that label. I'm more into brutal death metal and slam at this point. Like, that's kind of my thing.
Yeah, there's a label called Doom to Obscurity that's been releasing basically reissues of just obscure death metal from a lot of American stuff, but they've reissued some Norwegian stuff like Vidar Vang, whatever. But they did the Abominant demos and Batham. I think this would fit on there really well. The
Interesting.
The demo, yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm looking at their site. I mean, we played shows with Corpse Vomit. Like we were kind of
EP
in.
Is fucking awesome. I got Bastards of Foreverville earlier in 2024. That is a fucking great EP or demo or whatever the hell it is, but I love that thing.
See, looking at this lineup on their site, it's kind of like Wild Rags Records or something like that.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it really is. Like Abominant was on Wild Rags, fucking Corpse Vomit was on Wild Rags. Like they're really like picking up some obscure stuff. The one they released that I really, really liked was Excoriate, Dead Molestation. That demo is fantastic.
I mean, I remember Skeletal Remains from the 90s. JL America was this fucking weird gateway drug for me for death metal, because I used to go to, when I first got into death metal, I found that there was this record store in Chicago called Rose Records. It was downtown. And they had a cutout section, and they had all the Osmos JL America cutouts. And that's how I found out about like Blasphemy, Impaled Nazarene, like all that kind of shit, Immortal. And but they also were into weird shit like Skeletal Remains and Organic Infest and all these like real weird like kind of folk art death metal bands from the 90s that everyone hated. They're just like, oh, these bands are so shitty. I was like, they're fucking awesome. They sound insane.
Skeletal Remains
like,
was a lot of fun. They had that I Want to Puke song where he's talking about wearing like a sandpaper condom or something.
Yeah, exactly. Like that kind of stupid shit. Yeah. So, I mean, you couldn't give those CDs away in the 90s. Those were like $1.99, $2.99, like no problem. Or Wicked Innocence. I mean, that kind of stuff. Like,
that shit's awesome.
That's pretty funny. Yeah, this is hilarious. This is like Wild Rags Records too. I mean, Wild Rags, I have some of those zines. I mean, that shit was, they were well known for ripping people off. But another, I mean, a 90s, 80s, 90s band that I'm totally into is Nuclear Death. I mean,
oh yeah,
big influence.
Phenomenal.
It does give that vibe. It's I don't know how apparent it is, but I get the same vibe from them.
Well, I think it's kind of like, I think I mentioned it earlier, it's like Sadistic Execution playing their fast and, you know, as fast as they play, doing Order from Chaos songs almost.
It almost sounds like industrial in a way. I'm not even exactly sure how, but I get that vibe too.
Wow, these are great compliments. I accept, and I accept for the band. Sadistic Execution playing Order from Chaos. That's about as good of a compliment for Hatewave as I think could ever happen. I'll take that.
Yeah, and you were mentioning when we were talking, like also liking like Sacramentary Abolishment and Axis of Advance too. Like those are really, really big bands for us through here.
Yeah, I mean those Canadian bands, totally like Ouroboros.
Oh, they're fucking awesome.
I mean, that's a naughty album cover. I do own it, but like, you know, it's not allowed or whatever.
Yeah, I own it too.
Well, I kind of knew Antichrist Kramer a little bit. He was kind of like in the mix for a while. Like, he's an interesting character. I mean, definitely a rogue. But yeah, I mean, those Axis of Advance is a great band. We were into them at the time. Like, yeah, all that stuff. I mean, early Revenge. I mean, Revenge kind of got popular in a weird way or whatever, but like Conqueror was kind of like the baseline for that as far as I was concerned. But I loved Order from Chaos. Yeah, totally. Awesome. We were into all that stuff because it was rogue and far out and fucked up, and or Nog the Eblitz, like that's later, but
Yeah, it seems like a lot of those bands, like during their time, especially like Axis, I feel like people really didn't appreciate what they're hearing at the time.
Yeah, totally. We knew about sacramentary abolishment back in the day. I mean, that was just, we were into like heavy, crazy, weird, rogue, nightmare, like not cool, not PC. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Like whatever. I mean, I take that with a grain of salt. I mean, I'm not a racist. I'm not a Nazi. None of that stuff. I mean, I no way. But like, we could take that stuff with a grain of salt. I mean, like the lyrics of Hatewave, like I don't endorse those as like my outlook on my way of life or anything. I mean, they were just like some fucked up poetry that our crazy singer came up with. I didn't care. I mean, maybe that's like a privilege to not care, but whatever.
Yeah, no chickens were harmed during that recording.
Not during the recording, during the live set.
Those were slit.
Yeah, there you go.
That was only
throats.
Slit the chicken's throat. Yeah, that happened once.
Oh my goodness, I forgot about that.
Oh yeah, it's on. We have the videotape of that. I mean, it happened. We got death threats and stuff like that from like random idiots. I mean, it's pathetic, really. It's not really that cool. I mean, I was just like, yeah, whatever, man. Okay, whatever.
Bite the head off like Ozzy.
Well, the chicken got eaten in a soup because Sasha was the cook. So, I mean, it was like, it didn't go to waste. I would say that the girl who cut the chicken's head off, it took her a few more whacks than we thought it would. It was kind of like, yikes. I mean, it was pretty rough. I mean, there's a videotape
It's a man's job.
The people at the Expo of the Extreme, like some of the audience members were not happy with how extreme it was. I'll put it that way. I didn't think it was very extreme. I thought it was kind of stupid, but like whatever, we did it anyways. Hey man, we're trying to be extreme, like cut a head off a chicken. That's real extreme stuff. I guess.
But I'll say if you guys want to get into like the samples, what songs did you have in mind? I know Dan wanted to go with "Suicide" for the first track.
Ever since you posted the timestamps, I didn't get a chance to go through and see the one that I wanted because there was a track around the middle, but it was probably
maybe 4 or like the second half of 5.
Yeah, it might have been "Slit the Catholic Throat" around there.
Yeah, that's an awesome song.
Yeah,
that's the one with the harmonics or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, "Slit the Catholic Throat" is kind of like the only slow doom part thing that we've ever had.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it has the music video and everything.
Yeah.
All right,
yeah, that video was kind of just hacked together by me from just random few surviving videos of the band. I mean, back in the day, you would record these things on VHS and then you would record some stupid shit over it. So like a lot of things didn't really survive. But there's a few Hatewave videos. They're on YouTube or whatever. I put them up.
Yeah, I've seen the 2 of them that are there, and I was like, oh yeah, the videos just like those kind of cut together, like and I was gonna mention too. I like your guys' corpse paint. It's like the black smears.
Yeah, I mean, we were definitely pretty rogue. We were not into conforming to anything. Even within ourselves. So, I mean, we just it was like a rogues gallery, just 3 bizarre weirdos fucking banding together to play this grinding nonsense. So,
well, let's get into the first track, Dan's pick, "Suicide," and then we'll be right back.
Nonsense.
Fall
My favorite. We're back from the first track, Suicide. Fred?
Smoking.
That
A
sucked.
positive message for today's youth.
Wait a minute, what was that, Fred?
I said that sucked.
Oh, okay.
Bro,
I
not in
didn't
front of the
hear you.
guests.
But
That's
a band
That's
I
fine.
have been listening to a lot of lately, Satanas. The more mid-paced parts of that track remind me of some of the stuff that they've done, which makes sense because I hear a lot of Order from Chaos when I listen to them too. So, no, that was a great track. The whole demo is fucking great.
Yeah, some of
I'm
the mid-paced
I'm
chugs
trying
are
to
pretty good.
I'm trying to think who wrote that song. I had nothing to do with it. That was a song that I think they had in the first version of the band, and it got brought over to the second version that I joined. Um, I don't know. I feel like Sasha wrote that. I don't really know what he was influenced by at that point. He just liked death metal. So
yeah. It seems like those first power chords. It was just played with the like black metal tone, but I could definitely see that in like a death metal song. Dun, 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 dun. So
I like the first part of that riff there. It reminds me of Hollow's Eve plunging to Megadeth. I don't know if there's any thrash heads out there, but it sounds kind of similar. This honestly doesn't sound that death metal to me. It sounds more like I guess
right.
what you would expect from a a band like kind of trying to go backwards a little bit, which I guess is like black metal in general, right?
I get really
Yeah, I
early
mean,
Hail
there's
Nazarene vibes from it.
because it's got the whole like power chord thing. It's not so much about this death metal kind of like chromatic like single note lines or something like that. I
Yeah,
agree with you.
yeah. I don't think any of the riffs really. None of them sound generic at all. It honestly, it's totally different for like something that's supposed to be a like bestial black metal thing because it's so weird. It like yeah, it's grindy, but it also has almost too much structure for it to be like a straight up grindcore thing, like Blood or something like that. It sort of reminds me of that, but more structured. It is totally unique on its own.
I mean, I remember when we worked on that song, it was kind of like we used to do it really laboriously where we would come into practice and like one of the guitar players would play the riff and we'd come up with the part like right there. So when I was writing the drum parts to that, I don't think I listened to the earlier demo. We just literally got into the practice room and like Sasha played the chord progression, then I would like try to figure out what to put to it. So it wasn't really coming from any kind of stylistic thing. It was more like, all right, well, he's got these like three chords and I want to play blast beats, so I'm just going to play a blast beat, and we would do it over and over again until we had like the arrangement.
yeah, and
Very inefficient.
man, but
Such
that
a
that
waste of time.
that payoff
Yeah.
though, because when the initial blast comes in, it's just like sounds like the fucking hi hat's gonna come off the stand. It's fucking insane.
Well, it's that is the folly of youth. I've had to make my technique better to compensate for my being an old fart. I'm 52 now, and when I recorded that, I was like 25 or whatever. Like, so when you're young, you have all this extra energy to waste. So you've got this extra, like, I call it balls power. I mean, I know that's gendered or whatever, but it's kind of like what it is. It's like the young stupidity of young man, like, and now, like, when I do Encenathrakh, it's more about like,
Your
I want to be
fingers.
wild and I want to go nuts. But yeah, it's exactly. It's all about like fingers and like efficiency and being able to like have the stamina to not slow down. Because nothing sounds worse than somebody who's trying to play fast but like runs out of gas and slows
Oh
down. Right?
yeah, and it's like such
That's the
a
worst.
it like deflates the balloon.
Yeah, just it's amateur hour. It's like, oh, womp womp, you couldn't do it. So
So your time to shine, and you blew it.
yeah, so like in a weird way, I think with something like Hatewave, we were also doing live takes in the studio, so we were like really amped up. Um, we weren't really on anything when we did it. I mean, various members of the band were on various things at various points. We don't have to go into that, but like, you know, like we were just stoked to be like recording and like, now we're going to fucking kill it. So there's a lot of adrenaline going on with those performances because they're live in the studio, you know?
Yeah, especially when you have like these songs that you're rehearsing and you're like finally gonna, you know, get it recorded. There's something a bit surreal about that, especially, you know, probably back then too, you know, for you, because it's more, I'm around that age now and recording, it's like, it was almost out of body experience with this album that we recorded like 2 years ago. We were only on White Monster at the time though.
Okay.
But
Yeah,
but
I
yeah.
mean, also we none of us had any money, so we were really broke. So we're like, we gotta do this quick and get out of this. So it's like every take mattered. You know, I don't know how many takes we did. I feel like there's no way we did more than 2 takes per song. I mean, it just seems impossible to me because
Yeah.
we were like looking at the clock the whole time.
But yeah,
That's like every record I've ever made.
yeah,
Looking at the clock, like trying not to spend the money. Like,
I was gonna say, what a way to open the demo though. That's such a great track.
well, thanks. I was listening to the takes in the order that they were recorded, and I think that was recorded fairly later in the session. It wasn't like the first take we did, but I guess we were warmed up at that point.
Okay. And
Yeah.
Fred, did you happen to have a song you wanted to listen to?
Yeah, we'll do Slit the Christian Throat for me.
Catholic Throat, man.
Catholic. I'm going off of memory here, bud.
Hey, it's okay. We'll go with that sentiment either way. It's all encompassing.
Cut the religion's throat.
The religion.
All right. Well, that's gonna be the 4th track, and we'll be right back. throwback from the fourth track, Slit the Christian's Throat, like Fred said. And yeah, what a way to just end the song. And right before that build up with the toms, there's a blast beat that you're doing that's a little bit slower, and then it just builds up into this just even faster blast beat, and it's like this guy. I love when songs do that, and it's like what you mentioned with the Mayhem cover that you guys did. It's like
Yep.
it's really fast, and it's like, all right, no way this guy can go faster, and it does, and then it keeps going faster, and like just keeping that endurance and using those tempos for the appropriate riffs is just like such a when it works, it always sounds great, and that was the case right there. And you also mentioned that this was like one of the like slower tracks too, with like the chuggier riff with their harmonics. I think you guys play with the dynamics so well in this track. It's like you guys are bouncing in between that riff and then going to a blast, and then going to a more like skank kind of beat. Um, and I think it just works out like so well, and the way you guys stop start just in particular riffs too, it kind of is like a structured like a not like a riff to riff structure, but like a within the riff kind of structure, like gluing it together, and it just makes it sound so chaotic. And I don't know how you guys were able to play that shit live, especially that fast. It's phenomenal.
Well, thank you. I think Sasha wrote that song, and it was another one where he came into rehearsal and he had these like chord changes, and we kind of hacked it out until we had an arrangement. So he had it in his head, like what he thought it wanted to be, but it's not like he had a demo or anything with a drum machine or, I kind of just hacked out the drum part. We just did it over and over until we had it. But I think that your point about the tempos is really important, which is it's really not on the grid. It's definitely not to a click. It's like it gets faster and then it gets faster and then it gets faster. Like we really wanted to go with this idea that like sometimes at certain points of the song, it would just take off.
Yeah.
Just because the intensity wants to go to some next level.
Yeah, and there was a point too where you guys, I think it was just one guitar going with like the rhythm riff, and then you were doing like cymbal chokes one after another, just like quarter beats of it, and then it sounded almost, I don't know, like the other guitar was kind of doing something like really really bright just for that like 2 repetition count, and just like things like that in the song just make like a huge impact, especially when you're only playing with like a certain amount of riffs, because this isn't necessarily like a riff salad band. You guys are going back to riffs and structures, so it's just nice to hear these little subtle I guess inflections in like these bridge sections that you have. It's just really awesome.
Well, Mark was such a good guitar player. He would like Sasha was really raw. Like he was kind of he didn't have a lot of technique. He was just kind of like grinding away at these bar chords and stuff. So Mark was more of a virtuoso guy. So he would sort of hear these things he could lay on top of them to kind of not make it just so like bar chordy and stuff like that. We definitely got into some riff salad kind of shit at the end of the band. Like the songs that we would have written for the second album that we kind of don't really have great recordings of, those were definitely a lot more like technical. We weren't into like Dillinger Escape Plan per se, but we were kind of a little into that idea of, well, why don't we write these lines that don't make any sense? And, like we were definitely getting into some weirder territory at the end, but we kind of broke up before we recorded that stuff. We just kind of went wherever we wanted to go, but we definitely wanted to be brutal and fast, and that was really just the focus of the band.
Yeah, that's really cool that it's like Sasha provided the like meat and bones, and then Mark was there with the garnish, and you were just there like gluing it together. And
yeah,
I think it's goes to show with like a lot of great bands, it's like you have like this, like you said with like slam, it has like this really ignorant, primitive energy, and then also on the other side, it's like this really like musical touches on it that is just like a perfect blend. And I think the little spots in these songs, like the ones I pointed out, is like just a perfect example of it because it's not just the same riff playing over again. There's something laid on top of it the second time that makes you want to hear it again because it's something that you're gonna miss when you know listen to it for the first time. You know.
Yeah, I mean that kind of idea just comes out of butt rock, like classic rock. Like if you've got a part that's good, like why not play it a few times and let it sink in? Because I mean, with a lot of death metal, frankly, it goes in one ear and out the other, and I like it for that. I don't have a problem with that. Like a lot of death metal I listen to, like I can't remember anything about it when it's done, but I know that I liked it. Like it was brutal and it like was fucked up and shit happened and the drumming was crazy, and, but like I don't know. I mean, I almost feel like we had strong harmonic gravity in our songs that kind of relate to punk or whatever, but yeah, we were just a real mutant band. I mean, we really weren't working in any specific template. Um, we liked black metal, we liked death metal, we liked war metal, we liked grindcore, we liked weird shit. I mean, we liked a lot of things, and ultimately, I think we just threw it together in this manner, and that's what it was. Like,
Yeah, I got
a
filtered
lot of
through
people
all
didn't
that.
really get it. Yeah, I mean, it's fine. I mean, we knew what we were doing. We were really conscientious about it. I mean, we were all addicts of music addicts, so it's not like we like didn't roll deep on music. We knew everything.
Yeah.
It's funny because, I wasn't really into like so-called brutal death metal at the beginning. I mean, I remember when like Dying Fetus and all that shit came out, and I was kind of like,
Hmm.
yeah, it's pretty good, but it wasn't really like my cup of tea. Later on, I mean, I still don't really listen to Dying Fetus so much, but I'm trying to think of bands that we liked back in the day that uh, I was kind of like, oh, that's cool, but now I really like. I mean, I don't know. We were at the point when we did the demo, we were really into like that kind of war metal stuff and Conqueror and all that stuff, but we liked Deicide and whatever.
Yeah. Because I know a lot of
It,
those bands, like from Tampa, they have a little bit more of uh, I guess like a more regular like song structure for their songs, and
yeah,
they're working with the verse chorus kind of
yeah.
thing, and not
Well,
necessarily like those linear progressions and stuff that you're mentioning.
I mean, we were in Chicago when United Guttural was still a label. So, I mean, we played shows with Flesh Grind and shit like that. So,
Hmm.
we were kind of in the air with the early brutal death metal bands, like the ones that kind of went dumber and more like, duh, like, just like hammer blast, like,
Yeah,
like kind of thing. So, I don't know. It's just like metal, like you're around all this stuff all the time. And, you know, it
that must
just
be so interesting to have been at like one of those shows where it's like you're with these sort of like proto like BDM bands, and then you hear some war metal shit like this. It's like,
And new levels of fucking extremity.
yeah, because it's all
well,
like
we
congruent.
we played on super random bills. I mean, like I'm looking at we played kind of about 2 dozen shows in this lineup, and we did shows opening for Anal Cunt. We did shows opening for like Charles Bronson, Drop Dead,
Oh
Napalm
damn.
Death, Cavity, 6 Feet Under, Incantation, and like one of our last shows was opening for the Boredoms. Like whatever, it was just we kind of just went wherever. Uh, we didn't really fit into the scene so great. We just tried to like play shows when we could, and people were like really confused. Like my friends didn't like Hatewave. They were kind of like, "Oh, what's this band he's in?" Like sometimes you're in a band where your friends are just like, "Yeah, I don't get this one. Like you can have this." Like.
I'll go to one show.
Yeah, I mean, my interest in death metal was seen as kind of like peculiar by my friends who were in these kind of like noise rock bands. They're kind of like, I don't understand what's with the like heavy metal stuff. I was like, it's fucking awesome. What are you talking about? I was proselytizing about death metal in the 90s to people who just did not care at all. They just did not get it. They're like, huh? What is this, like white trash? I'm like, I am white trash. Like, what are you talking about? I mean, yeah, I like Albert Eiler too, but like, geez, you know, like, I'm working class scumbag. I mean, my, you know, I grew up in the 70s and 80s. Like my cousins were like super hillbillies. They were like had the pubic hair mustache and the feathered hair and like AC/DC written on the back of the blue jean jacket and all that stuff. That's where I was kind of like, oh, I don't know about heavy metal, but like I said, once I heard Deicide, I was like, this is what I'm into. Fuck yeah, you know. So.
But yeah, Fred, what do you think of this track?
I love the variety from the different sections, and Weasel, just so you understand, I am musically incompetent. I don't know anything about terminology and what kind of beats. I express my adoration for music by comparing it to other bands that I enjoy, whether or not they were actually involved in being an influencer or not. That's just how I do it. But the crazy skronky parts remind me a lot of Axis of Advance, especially in the Obey kind of era.
Cool.
The ending, the fucking wild ending, is like demo era Impaled Nazarene kind of wild, which
Cool.
is great. And the slower mid pace parts, like I said, I maybe it's just 'cause I've been listening to a lot of Satanas lately, and I just hear them and everything, but remind me of that, and that's fucking great too. So yeah, this
Cool.
was definitely the track that I was thinking of when I wanted to pick one out. So Paul, good call on realizing which one it was.
Yeah, it's an awesome track.
We were definitely into the early Impaled Nazarene, especially first album and demos. I mean, we definitely were into that shit, and Axis of Advance definitely. So yeah, right on.
I gotta ask.
You're hearing
it's a constant debate over here for sacramentary abolishment. River of Corticone or Distracting Stone?
Oh, I don't know that I prefer one over the other, to be honest.
That doesn't help.
No, I got nothing for you. Like those records are a little bit of riff salad to me, so they kind of do go in one ear and out the other. But what I like about it is the scrappiness of the drumming, like the sort of struggle element of it. Like I really like that. And their riffs are just so bizarre. Like they don't kind of make any sense to me.
Yeah, it's so alien, especially on that first album.
Yeah. I mean, that's what's cool about it. Like, and I mean, Axis of Advance is a little more kind of like, it's a little more dialed in. Like it's real angular and kind of like simpler in a weird way. Like Sacramentary Abolishment is a little more baroque and like kind of off the rails or something. Like it's kind of like you don't really know where those songs are going. Axis of Advance is a little more like it's abstract, but it's like sharper and harder and simpler in a weird way. I don't know.
Yeah, it's just like structured more like militaristic, I think, versus like the punk edge of Sacramentary.
Yep.
But Dan, what do you think of the track?
Something I did want to bring up that I noticed about the vocals, it kind of reminded me of it doesn't really, again, it doesn't really sound like generic death or black metal. It sort of reminds me of Steve-O from Imp and Tygo.
That's interesting.
And even
I was thinking about the vocals today.
Yeah, it reminds me of Lori from Nuclear Death too.
Oh yeah,
kind of has that weird, like
off the rails kind of thing.
It's
yeah,
like
I mean,
cadence. It's like a certain tone that this guy does here.
It's like almost
funny
scratchy.
Because when we did the album, we did the album, he was trying to be a little more death metal, quote quote. You know what I mean? It's a little more like guttural or something like that, but not like, you know. But I think it was coming definitely out of grind, and Nuclear Death definitely was an influence on us at the time. So
somehow,
I mean, that's pretty accurate.
Somehow this music reminds me of Old Lady Drivers as well. if
Yeah,
that makes
I
any
feel like
sense.
Sasha was into the earache stuff. That probably
Yeah.
has a lot to do with his approach. Yeah.
Oh, is that it,
Yeah,
Dan?
you guys are pretty much dissecting the music and hearing it like down to a T. It's it's pretty satisfying for me. Like we pretty much mentioned like all the exact influences of this band like down to a T. So I mean, it's like, you know, we were just trying to make music we liked, and we definitely weren't doing it as some like hard template of like it's got to be like this. It was just more like throwing everything we like into the mix and just going with it, because
Yeah.
nobody really cared, so we didn't really have that much feedback. Like we got some reviews and zines and stuff like that, but like yeah, you know, like we were just not really seen as like a contender. We were just kind of this schleppy local band that people were like, huh, those guys? Like, huh, what?
That's a shame.
I think it was too much for a lot of people. You know, it was just, I don't know, whatever.
I wish I would have seen that shit live. Would have been crazy. Yeah, because you guys are
yeah, well,
growing up to be like one
missed that
of
boat.
yeah, yeah. You guys were crawling up to be like in like my top bands, especially with this demo. And
Whoa.
I wanted to play the next track. Actually, it's the Untro and Bleed for Me, which is a little bit more of a mid-bass dynamic track, along with the one before. So if you guys want to go into that one.
Yeah, we
What time is that at?
All right, we'll be right back. back from that fifth track, the intro, Bleed For Me, the second wave side, side B. Yeah, I just really enjoyed that syncopated drum part at the beginning where it's like like, and then going again, releasing into this frenzy of blast beats, and then these like weird, like I don't know if it's maybe my ears or something, but it's like almost doing these hammer-ons on these tremolo riffs that just give it like some sort of bounce to it too. And then before that part was sort of like a punk riff, and instead of like going into what you would expect like a D beat or a skank beat, it's just like this really mid-pace rolling double bass beat, and it's just like it's awesome to be thrown for a loop like that, especially when you're expecting something and you get the rug taken out from under you. It's always refreshing to hear that, and refreshing from 1997. So
Like I said in the breaks, my approach to drumming was sort of along the lines of it's got to be fast all the time. So if I'm not going fast on the bottom, I'm going fast on top, and if I'm not going fast on the top, I'm going fast on the bottom. You know what I mean? Like that's just seems like classic death metal to me in a way. Like you've always got to be playing like something. And also it's funny because I was thinking while you guys were listening to it, you can really hear the struggle between the kind of like second wave black metal or like Napalm Death like blast beat, and then like the hammer blast, like all downbeat blast. Like that's that's a struggle that's been going on in the music forever, because BDM won't do the like second wave black metal blast beat. You know what I mean? It's like, you know what I mean? So we have the struggle between them in the Hatewave material. Struggle for supremacy. Yeah. But like my second wave like blast beat thing is totally from De Mysterious Dom Satanis. I mean, just like Hellhammer's drumming on that is so smooth and creamy, just like that kind of like, I don't, black metal got real stale to me by 2000 because of the kind of like irony and goth factors of it. It just didn't really appeal to me. Like I liked early black metal, second wave black metal, just because of like the blasting, like pure Holocaust, Battles in the North, De Mysterious, like that kind of stuff, When black metal turned into this like hilarious meme, I was like, way gone. I was like, I'm out later. Bye. But that's why I liked war metal, because war metal was kind of like black metal without the, like the kind of like goth, wimp kind of stuff that I didn't like about it.
Yeah, no keyboards.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of not into this sort of like I don't know, like gothic kind of Vog, like I don't know. I wanted it to be brutal, so whatever. But yeah, like the early Immortal records and Mayhem and Dark Throne and all that kind of stuff. I mean, we were into that for sure.
Nice. What do you guys think of it, Fred?
I hate to use the term more of the same, but it's just consistent with the rest of the demo, and it's shifting back and forth with various levels of extremity, and that's what I want from this demo. Like it doesn't let up, and Weasel pointing out that there's always something fast going on kind of spells out what's so great about this demo. Even when things slow down a bit, something is driving it forward quickly. So there's a constant level of extremity on this that doesn't ever let up. And that's what makes this sound so extreme. So, and this track continues with that. It's got its own riffs, it's got its own everything, but it's consistent with the rest of the demo in such a way that I like that sort of thing. I don't want things to be too varied, and this is just the right level. No, awesome track.
Very well said, Fred.
You guys are making me so proud of my little band I had when I was 24 5 years old or whatever. I mean, you're kind of like getting it on the terms that we made it on, because we really conscientiously just wanted to be really hardcore and fast and fucked up the whole time. Like that was the whole point. And it, like we didn't care about being a heavy metal band per se. I mean, we had at least one heavy metal guy, like real heavy metal guy, but we didn't care about it. We cared about being extreme. And death metal and black metal or war metal or whatever the fuck you want to call it, like that was just a platform for us to be like intense and fast and crazy. I mean, that's what we were trying to do. But I think a lot of extreme metal bands, that's what they're trying to do.
Yeah. Dan, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with Weasel. He says that it kind of isn't exactly a heavy metal band. I like that it kind of lacks melody. That's something that's kind of
Yeah.
it's totally dynamic, but it just doesn't do the thing that most people would want it to do, and I kind of like that about it. Um, I guess this song is I kind of see them as all different. Like the first one is probably the most metal one because that one has like sort of like interesting thrash riffs and these like big inflection points with the chords. The second one that we listened to was more like I don't know, that one almost reminds me of Fudge Tunnel or something where it's like some kind of like 90s hit or it could have been, you know what I mean? And then this one is sort of a mix between like regular second wave black metal and honestly something like power violence. It almost reminds me of like spaz or something like that. So yeah, I think they are
Well,
all
I mean,
unique.
we were in the mix with Spaz back then and those guys. I mean, Power Violence, like we were into like Hell Nation was a band that we were kind of
Oh yeah,
into.
they're good.
That's the one with the
But we
alien on the
played,
cover, right?
yes, yeah.
Okay. I've heard that
Your
one.
some Chaos Days are numbered or whatever it's called, something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Um, I feel like the Flying Ludenbachers or somebody played with Spaz in the 90s. I mean, we liked all that Power Violence stuff too. I mean, I feel like Power Violence didn't really date so well in a weird way. Like it doesn't stand up as well, but it was kind of like a fun. Yeah, that's astute. Like hearing Power Violence in Hatewave is not off the mark. I'll say that.
Hey, I usually
We played with
don't
Charles
really.
Bronson and Drop Dead and stuff like that. I mean, whatever,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah,
That's sick.
some of the
Yeah,
big bands are okay to me. I'm not huge on that genre, but I
sure.
feel like this song sort of I don't know. I didn't dislike it at all. I actually I thought it was uh, a good sort of mixing of these styles without really going from this is this part, this is that part. It all kind of mixes in real well. And most
Yeah.
people probably wouldn't even see it that way, but yeah, I think
I'd
it's
be
cool.
curious. I'd be curious to ask Sasha how much Power Violence vocals had to do with the Haywave demo. That's an interesting question. I don't actually know.
You could definitely hear some kind of hardcore, like totally non-metal influences within the vocals. It doesn't really sound like
Yeah,
any band in particular, really. I mean, maybe some of the closest things were what I said earlier, like Nuclear Death, Impetigo,
yeah,
and then a band you mentioned
right.
earlier, like Skeletal Earth. That one's yeah, the vocals are just a bit different. Maybe even like early Autopsy or something, where it's not
Yeah,
totally, a time where the vocals aren't.
More like throaty and scratchy, right?
Well, no. There's where the vocals aren't like, oh, you have to do it this way, or this is the way it's
right.
done. It's more like whatever comes out comes out.
Hmm.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
Even on the
One thing that
album,
really reminded me
I feel
of
like he
is
tried to go a little more straight death, but he kind of failed at doing that there too. Like it's not really, it's not incantation or something like that.
what were you gonna say, Fred?
one that reminded me of, and this is really out of left field, but any of you guys ever heard the Medellin LP from, or it's more of an EP, I guess, from Herpes from Colombia?
I think
Sure.
so.
Yeah.
That is bonkers extreme. Uh, doesn't let up at all through all of it, and I think it's a bit more grindy than than Hatewave, but it's same level of intensity the whole way through, and it kind of reminded me of that as we would listen through it.
The Herpes record, I mean, we didn't hear that back when we were a band. I mean, that was kind of a thing that was so rare that it's kind of like a YouTube find later on, you know? Like, I don't know that I've ever even seen a copy of that record in real life, but they were sort of like unintentionally noisecore, I think, because Herpes wasn't really like a technically good band per se, but that's exactly why their recordings are so crazy, because it was some weird mutant version of like music that they thought was maybe more musical than it was, but it's like really crazy and noisy and destructive. Yeah,
I love it for that reason.
Yeah, I don't think we heard Herpes. I mean, there's maybe maybe the singer might have had that, but I don't really remember it from back in the day. I only know of Herpes from like the last 10 years or whatever. So.
Either way, whether or not it was an influence, it reminded me of it, and I love that recording. It's off the wall, so it's
awesome. Well, our live stuff that we will probably put on the reissue is kind of crazier than the studio recordings, because we're like so out of our fucking minds. So I mean, it's a lot more chaotic than we were in the studio. In the studio we're like trying to play good or whatever, but live we're just like nightmare. It's the kind of thing where the blast beats are almost like tripping over each other because they're too fast, you know. It sounds like somebody being thrown down a flight of stairs kind of shit. Like I can't hear the kick drum, so it's just like blah, 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 blah. So I don't know, some of that shit will be on the reissue.
That's cool.
Oh yeah. Is there a song in particular that we didn't cover that you wanted to talk about, or you wanted us to hear?
That's a good question. I kind of thought about that a little bit. Let me run down the track list real quick. I mean, I feel like the odd one out is the 8th track, Violencio. I feel like that was kind of like a link to the later Hatewave stuff, which was like maybe a little bit more metally and a little more riffy and stuff like that. But I don't know. I mean, I guess we recorded this on Super Bowl Sunday in '97, and I had to actually look that up. So January 26th. I don't know why that was significant. I don't care about the Super Bowl at all. But yeah, so I guess we went in on Super Bowl Sunday '97 and recorded that shit. So it's so long ago.
Touchdown.
I mean, it's hitting like 30 years now. So it's kind of crazy.
That was epic, Paul.
Yeah,
right. Well, you wanna listen to that one? On the track list here, it says it's a 7th song though. Is that right?
Oh yeah, you're right. 7th song.
Cool.
Yeah. Yep.
All right, we'll be right back. Yeah, that song definitely stands out. I think that one probably has the most death metal riffing, and just the rhythms that you guys were playing. Kind of, you guys would like converge together and then go apart. There was like certain parts where you're like syncopating, and then you would just go off on like a double kick, like da 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 da, and then
Oh,
you
we
did a
recording?
yeah yeah,
Oh, okay.
and then we were doing yeah. I'm not gonna make that mistake 3 times,
3 times.
but yeah, and then you're going into a more death metal like bomb blast rather than like the like skank Norwegian kind of blast beat, which was nice to hear that there's different varieties of blast beats because it's all extreme, but all has its own place where it's needed. Yeah, good
Yeah, I
track.
feel like Mark had more to do with writing this song because a lot of the songs on the demo, I think Sasha just had like the chord progressions and we just sort of worked out the arrangements. But I feel like this was a song where Mark had more of a say in the arrangement, and he's definitely a little more of like a single note, like riff, muted, like picker guy.
Hmm.
So I feel like we put that song together. We might have written it um, like that might have been one where it wasn't totally planned out and we kind of like hacked it out in rehearsal and kind of like arranged it from scratch, like all three of us. So I think that was kind of like the direction that we would explore more on the album, like that kind of stuff. So I don't know. There were little phases of the band, obviously.
Hmm.
That closing spiraling riff is one of my favorite on the demo.
Cool.
What do you think, Dan?
It's funny. I think about like if I mean I could still play this stuff. Like I'm more efficient now, so I don't know, like I could still play this stuff. I just don't. It's funny because every once in a while somebody goes, "Oh, Hatewave should play again." I'm like, Jesus Christ, this is not going to happen. I mean, I don't think Sasha would do it. I think he's kind of like moved on at this point. But like me and Mark could do it, but like I don't know. It's funny with a band like this where there was like kind of no demand for it ever. It's kind of hard to be like, yeah, let's spend lots of time and energy like relearning these songs. It just seems like kind of like insane to me, but like whatever. It's not totally impossible. It's just improbable. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, because I haven't heard anyone really talk about this band at all. Like I'm the
Nope.
first person to come across it that out of people that I know, and it seems like
It's
it's
obscure.
their first time hearing it too when I show them. So it's definitely yeah, really really obscure. But it's like I said, I was mining for like grindcore, Black Death stuff at the time, and found gold. In my opinion.
Well, I hope that the reissue on Mortville Noise might have an audience because I always felt like we weren't in the right place or something like that. Like the people would have liked our music, but we weren't on like the right label or playing with the right bands or in the right scene or something like that. So I'm hoping that Mortville Noise, who does a lot of like noisecore and grindcore and stuff like that, like it might fit in there with a newer audience. Not that I mean, no one's going to get rich or famous. It's not really about that. It's just more about like someone listening to the music, liking it. So, I mean, if that works out, yay, great. I don't know. I guess like after doing this for 35 years, I'm pretty humble because I never was popular. So I don't have an inflated ego about my music making. It's just like I made music I wanted to make because I felt like it needed to be made because no one else was making it. So as such, it tended not to be very trendy or popular because it wasn't like part of the zeitgeist. It was just what we thought we needed to do. Like when we
Yeah.
were making like war metalish type music, that wasn't really popular, but it was something that inspired us. We wanted to make our own version of that. You know, that's about it.
And we'll get you a whopping 100 listeners on this. So
Sounds good. Steal it. Get it off SoulSeek. Do whatever you want. It's out there. It's on YouTube. I mean, whatever. It's all good. We I mean, Hatewave never really made any money. I mean, like sometimes on some gigs we'd get paid like 100, $150 or whatever. You know, it's fine. Whatever. I don't know. We didn't. It was a labor of love. Like we just wanted to have a really extreme band, and we were friends, and we just
You guys nailed
wanted to
it.
play crazy shit. Yeah. So.
But
Demo.
you or Fred or Dan, you guys have any final thoughts about the demo, or have anything to ask Weasel?
Thought I heard Fred say something.
Speechless.
Oh, you said Dan, go.
Oh, Dan, go? I can't hear him back there. Yeah, I definitely think there's an audience for this within the metal crowd. I don't know that. I honestly don't know what the fuck goes on in like noise scenes or anything like that. I don't even know shit about what the fuck are noise bands, anyways. But metal wise, I think this kind of does stand the test of time a bit, and it was original for its time, and it's still pretty original now. I mean, like Paul, you mentioned that Concrete Winds, who are like a nowadays band, seem to have some of the same ideas like 20, 30 years later after this comes out, you know? Yeah, there's like a whole wave of bands that are influenced by like Necrovore in a weird futuristic kind of way that I think, Hatewave predates, which is very cool. And and because of that, it still has a lot more original ideas to it, which more people should check out the demo and the album and the fucking other demo. They're all it's a good discography. I like it.
You can get that reissue.
I like that. I like on the original demo. It starts off. He's like, "Shit, piss, come."
Oh yeah.
But yeah, super solid stuff. Yeah, I dig it.
Freddie?
I've heard this band. I've heard this band, Concrete Winds, before. I got to recheck them out because somebody told me about them like a few years ago. I'm gonna check it out again.
Yeah, there's like Concrete Winds, Omega Vortex would be another one. They're like Necrovorish kind of influence. Beyond from Germany was another one. That's a little bit different, I think.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think Omega Vortex and Concrete Winds are kind of going for this futuristic, like almost industrial Black Death war metal thing, which why is it's kind of
what about Nuclear Hammer? Are you into Nuclear Hammer at all?
Yeah, we all like
they're
Nuclear
awesome.
Hammer, I think
they're local to me.
I think they're very weird, but I like to think they fit into the canon with this somehow. They're more extreme in terms of like their epic nightmare or reverb kind of thing, but like,
Yeah, I heard they were coming out with a new album. I don't know whatever happened with that. Either way, I'm gonna have to check them out again too. It's been such a long time. I liked both their albums.
Yeah.
No, that other album is still in the works. It's just slow.
Oh, okay.
Nuclear War now issued a demo version of some of the tracks that are on there. When they actually get around to releasing it, I'm not sure.
Oh, it's really great. They're both like 14 minutes long. It's really insane.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, they're kind of continuing what they started on Serpentine. And that album is one of the most.
They're very strange.
War metal I've ever heard.
Yup. Pretty crazy.
Freddie, you got any words?
I mean, I've said most of what I can say about this.
Well, say it again.
I just love the. Wow, rude.
Don't tell Fred what to do.
Fred, you're not gonna weasel your way out of this one.
Wow,
Hey,
I see what he did there. Womp womp. I think what shines through most on this demo is just the energy and passion for whatever the hell you were actually playing. Whether it wind up being noisecore, grindcore, death metal, it doesn't even matter. The energy is there, and it's just contagious. I don't know, like you can tell it was just all cylinders firing at the same time, and it just takes absolutely balls to the wall the entire way through. And I don't know if it's like something that only happens with young bands, but hear that as much when there's more experience in all the band members. It's just like really, really volatile, and it sounds like it's come apart of the hinges, and it doesn't, which is the most impressive part. Um, so it's just wildly violent, and that's what I like to hear in my metal. So awesome job, and the album rules too.
Well, thanks a lot, guys. Thank you. It's rewarding so long after the fact to have people actually get it and understand it so clearly. I mean, I feel like you guys are reading my minds with your assessments half the time. So it's satisfying, you know, because at the time we were just like, well, we're just going to do this thing, whatever.
Yeah,
as long as it's out there,
it's nice to hear that our
it'll get
yammerings
discovered
are sometimes,
eventually.
It's nice to hear that our yammerings are sometimes just as satisfying for the, for the band than they are for us.
Yeah.
Well, it's nice to, I mean, you guys know this music, so you actually get the references kind of down to a T, which is really satisfying. So, like, you know, the fact that you hear Nuclear Death and what we're doing, like, we weren't really trying to copy Nuclear Death, but we were definitely listening to, like, Bride of Insect is one of my favorite records, and, like, we were totally into that, you know, at the time. But it was also just part of the DNA. It wasn't like, you know, like, Sasha wasn't necessarily trying to sound like Lori Bravo, but he was definitely listening to her, and, like, that's just how all this shit rubs off on you, you know.
Yeah.
It just turns into your own mixture of influences. It's cool, you know.
You got any final words, Weasel?
Not really, just other than this is really good timing because we are working on sort of a definitive Hatewave reissue to come out on Mortville Noise Records pretty soon. And glad people are still paying attention to this obscure band that we had for a few years back in the 90s.
Nice. Yeah, thanks for getting back to me, so quick and joining us on the show and for, making this music. It's really, really great stuff, and, getting in my top tens and for just bands in general with the album and this demo for sure. And let me know if there's a third shirt because I'll wear it.
Well, I'll check. We might make some shirts when the reissue comes out. So, like, if there's a demand for it, I mean, we'll do it, of course.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I think we're gonna be signing off right now. So thanks.
Right on.
Some good insight here.
Thank you, and vomit on the cross and burn the book of lies.